Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Naruto. Hyuga's is paired with Magneto ability at the beginning. Chapter 21. What to do? Seeing that he had discovered the other party but could not detect the information, Hyuga Satoru became anxious. His Byakugan can indeed see the general situation of the stronghold, but the distance is too far, and he can only see the general layout of the personnel and the flow of chakra. I don't know what the mysterious Jonin talked about after he returned, what kind of force he was, or what his purpose was. After thinking for a while, Hyuga Satoru couldn't help but speak. Teacher Jiwei, I can roughly see the situation in the stronghold with my Byakugan. There are a lot of ninjas on the other side, which are far more powerful than the Iwan ninja team in the capital. If we don't find out their purpose, I'm afraid this mission will fail. Quote. I understand. Aburame smiled bitterly, but given the current situation, if we approach rashly, we may be attacked by the other side's ninjas. Hyuga Satoru's eyes flickered. Judging from the Byakugan vision, the range covered by the sensing barriers is 3 kilometers in radius. As long as you step into this range, you will be discovered by the opponent. Teacher Jiwei, can you use parasitic bugs to sneak in and detect information? No. Aburame shook his head slightly. I have tried it just now, but the distance is too far. The maximum control range of my parasite is 2 kilometers. If it exceeds this range, it will lose its direction because the command cannot be transmitted. Quote. Is this so? Hyuga Satoru frowned. The parasitic bug only has a control range of 2 kilometers. In the last kilometer, will it lose its direction due to the loss of instructions? Etc. In other words, if there was a way to replace the designated transmission of the last mile, would it be possible to control the parasite search intelligence? After thinking for a while, Hyuga Satoru's eyes gradually lit up. Teacher Jiwei, regardless of the situation of return, can you fix the order to fly 3 kilometers away to search for intelligence into the mind of the parasite? Aburame Jiwei thought for a moment and said, if it is just a simple implantation of instructions, it can be done, but once the distance exceeds 2 kilometers, I will lose control of the parasites, and then I will have to resign myself to fate. Hyuga took a deep breath and said, Teacher, hurry up and pick out a few strong parasites. I have a solution. What can I do? Aburame Jiwei looked at him in surprise. It's very complicated to explain. Teacher, please pick out the parasites first. Aburame nodded slightly, stretched out his left hand, and several black bugs crawled from the sleeve to his fingertips. Hyuga took 2 kunai, rubbed them against each other a few times, and ground out some metal particles. He picked up a small amount of metal particles with his fingers and placed them on the back of the parasite. The position he chose is very clever, just enough to be stably fixed on the insect without disturbing the flight of the parasitic insect. After doing all this, Hyuga Satoru looked at Aburame Jiwei and said, Teacher, now let's ingrain the command to detect intelligence into the consciousness of the parasite. Okay. Aburame Jiwei responded helplessly. Although he didn't know what Hyuga Satoru had in mind, he could only believe him now. After receiving the order, the parasitic bug flew up staggeringly and disappeared deep into the jungle. After a while, Aburame sighed slightly. I've lost control of the parasites. Hyuga was speechless and stared straight ahead. Time passed like this bit by bit, and the atmosphere gradually became depressed. The air seemed to turn into calm water, and the breathing of the 2 people became slower. Aburame Jiwei's eyes changed from expectation at the beginning, to worry later, and now to disappointment. It's been so long, I'm afraid the parasite that lost its command has been lost and it's impossible to bring the information back. The reason why he didn't choose to go back was because he didn't want to hurt Hyuga Satoru. His student was so confident that he couldn't refuse. After all, no one understands parasites better than the Aburame clan. The 2-kilometer limit is an unchangeable Achilles heel. Thinking like this, Aburame Jiwei's heart gradually became heavy. At this moment, he seemed to sense something and suddenly raised his head. After a while, I saw several small black insects flying staggeringly towards here. It actually succeeded. Aburame Jiwei opened his mouth in shock. Next to him, the corners of Hyuga Satoru's mouth were slightly raised. The iron filings previously placed on the parasites were used to locate the magnetic poles. In his previous life, he often heard that before an earthquake occurred somewhere, he could see a large number of birds and insects migrating. The reason was that birds and insects were very sensitive to changes in the geomagnetic field. Some flying insects even use the magnetic material in their bodies for geomagnetic orientation when migrating. Although Hyuga Satoru cannot change the geomagnetic field, he can simulate some changes in the geomagnetic field at his own location, and then orient it through the magnetic material placed on the parasite. This is a biological instinct imprinted in insect DNA over tens of millions of years of natural evolution. At the same time, Aburame Jaway next to him also absorbed the information sent back by the parasite, and his eyes flashed. I didn't expect that. 2 days later, outside the black market, a disguised Iwanin wrapped the scroll in his clothes, observed the surroundings, and walked to the front of the hotel. Master Shantu, the supplies have been received. Very good. Jonin, named Shantu, said approvingly. With such a large share of supplies, Lord Tsuchikage will definitely reward us well after we return. We are ready to return. After staying in this inhospitable place like the Iron Country for so long, our bodies are getting rusty. The 7-man team began to move outside the capital. In the forest, the emotions of several people were quite high. Which seller do you think actually sold off such a large share of supplies and took advantage of us? Yeah, I didn't expect that. I just planned to go to the Kingdom of Iron to buy some iron tools, but I accidentally discovered such a big harvest. Ha ha ha. A rock ninja laughed. It's a pity that the identities of both parties in the black market are kept secret. Otherwise, I would have thanked the other party this time. However, as soon as he finished speaking, he heard a sharp sound breaking through the air. The Iwa ninja's expression instantly froze, his mouth opened wide, his throat seemed to be cut by a sharp weapon, and blood splattered everywhere. The rock ninja's throat rolled, and the bright red foam in his mouth continued to overflow, and he fell down weakly. Seeing his companion die so miserably in front of him, Shantu's eyes were split open and he screamed with all his strength. Enemy attack. The moment he finished speaking, with a few whooshing sounds, several figures surrounded the Iwa ninja team, and the leader spoke indifferently. It's not necessary if you want to thank me. If you really want to thank me, just spare your life. Who are you? Shantu's eyes were bloodshot and he squeezed out these words from between his teeth. The dead don't need to know that much. The red-haired man at the head waved his hand, and saw patches of placer gold particles sweeping away like a golden surge. Shantu's pupils shrank. Magnet style. You are from Sunagakur village. After using earth style to block the big wave of placer gold, Shantu cursed angrily. Does Sunagakur village want to start a war with Iwagakure village? How dare you intercept us halfway? If Tsuchikage-sama finds out, have you thought about the consequences? Consequences. As long as you all die here, are there any consequences? Scorch style. Killed by steaming. The one who spoke was not Luo Sha, but a female ninja in cool clothes behind her. She waved her hand, and an orange fireball flew towards an Iwa ninja who was resisting Sand Shinobi. With a shrill scream, the Iwa ninja's body the water evaporated instantly, turning into a mummy-like state. Shantu's heart sank. Magnet-style Luo Sha, Scorch-style Yi Kang, and Sunagakur actually sent out 2 blood-stained ninjas. I'm afraid this time it's really more dangerous. At the same time, 1 kilometer away from the outbreak of the battle, 2 figures were hidden in the treetops of the big trees, quietly observing. As expected, Sand Shinobi came to intercept the Iwa ninja. Aburame said with a sigh. Yeah, who would have thought that the so-called large-value material transaction was actually directed and performed by Sunagakur? Hyuga raised his eyebrows and said helplessly. After detecting the information through his method, the results surprised everyone. The mysterious seller selling huge amounts of materials on the black market turned out to be Sunagakur, one of the 5 great ninja villages. This deal is like fishing bait, attracting innocent fish to take the bait. When the time is right, they hidden behind the scenes will show up and receive both money. Hyuga couldn't help but curse. This kind of thing can only be done at noon, because sooner or later something will happen. Sunagakur village is ranked at the bottom of the 5 great ninja villages in terms of strength. It really has to surprise Hyuga Satoru to have such courage. But if you think about it carefully, it seems that in the original work, the 3 wars were caused by the disappearance of the 3rd generation Kazekage of Sunagakur village. He was so stubborn that he could not go to war with the big brother Konoha. As a result, he was beaten to pieces and had to cede the land and beg for mercy. It seems that it is not unexpected to do such a thing now. Satoru, Sunagaku's side has sent Scorch-style Hagakura and Magnet-style Rasa. If we intervene rashly, our chances of winning may not be great. Aburame Jawei's face was a little solemn. If there was only one blood ninja, he was confident that he could block the opponent, but if there were two, the result would be hard to say. Don't worry, Teacher Jawei. Hyuga smiled at him. We don't have to fight them, we just need to destroy their plans. Aburame Jawei seemed to have thought of something, suddenly smiled and scratched his head. I almost forgot you had that. In the forest, the battle continues. But the defeat of the Iwa ninja side was inevitable. Under the joint strangulation of the two blood successor ninjas, the remaining Iwa ninjas were unable to resist and died miserably one after another. Seeing his companions dying in front of him, Shantu's eyes were bloodshot and his canthus was cracked. You fools, even if you die, I will make you pay the price. He quickly formed seals with his hands and slammed them on the ground. Chakra in his body poured into the ground crazily through his hands. Earth style, mountain earth jutsu. The ground beneath his feet suddenly split open on both sides, turning into two huge hemispheric walls that kept closing in the middle. The intense pressure seemed to crush all the sand shinobi into pieces. It's useless. Luo Sha spoke indifferently, and saw him slowly raising his hands. Countless placer gold surged out from under his feet, filling the cracked ground in an instant. Several golden tentacles stretched out from the big waves of placer gold, resisting deathly. Live on walls that are closed on both sides. Amidst the rumbling sound, the two began an anxious contest. Debris continued to fall from the huge wall, and cracks spread like spider webs where the placer gold tentacles were pressed. Shantu still had a lot of chakra left, so he could continue to fight Luo Sha, but after all, this was not a one-man battle. He turned around and looked behind him. In just a few breaths, his fellow Iwa ninjas were all but few left under the joint stranglehold of Yikang and Sand Shinobi. Until the last Iwa nin fell beside him, his blood-stained palms tightly grasping his trousers, his pupils trembling as he looked at him, and his Adam's apple rolling. Master Shantu, run away. Asshole. As if something was broken, a huge force surged out of the body, the mountains and soil roared to the sky, and a line of blood and tears flowed from the corners of the eyes. The huge wall that Luo Sha was firmly resisting began to tremble violently and kept closing in the middle. Are you still struggling to your death? Seeing that she could no longer resist Shantu's dying counterattack, Luo Sha cursed and jumped backwards, trying to get out of Shantu's attack range. Back away. This technique is very powerful, don't resist. Without the support of Luo Sha, the sand gold tentacles only trembled slightly for a few times before suddenly shattering, and the huge circular wall suddenly closed, like a huge tomb, swallowing up the sand shinobi who could not escape in time. The earth shook and dust flew up. Luo Sha narrowed her eyes slightly and stared at Shantu's position. After this operation, he has completely lost his ability to resist. He carefully thought about it and did not choose to take action himself. Instead, when the dust was about to disperse, he looked at Sand Shinobi, a member of the team. Kang, go kill him. Yes. The Sand Shinobi named Kang took out a kunai from his arms and approached Shantu cautiously. As he approached, he saw Shantu half kneeling on the ground in front of the huge hemispheric tomb, panting weakly, apparently losing his ability to resist. Die. A trace of ferocity flashed in his eyes, and he suddenly stabbed the kunai into the back of Shantu's head. A sudden change occurred. Before the kunai in his hand fell, goosebumps all over his body suddenly exploded, and a chill erupted from his tailbone along his spine to the back of his head. Before he could make any reaction, he saw a flash of blue light, and his head was shaking. It exploded directly, and the brains burst out. This tragic scene shocked everyone. Sand Shinobi stood there blankly. In the flash of lightning, they didn't even see what was happening. After a brief blank moment, Shantu's eyes shrank, and he immediately formed a seal, mobilizing a trace of the chakra he had just recovered to drill into the ground. What's wrong? Don't let him escape. Luo Sha's heart trembled. The Sand Shinobi reacted immediately and ran towards Shantu's position. However, the second arrow has arrived. The power of this arrow was even more terrifying, shooting straight into the unsuspecting Sand Shinobi crowd. Accompanied by broken flesh and shrill screams, the arrow first pierced the chest of a sand shinobi, and then opened the abdomen of the second sand shinobi. Finally, it pierced the thigh of the third sand shinobi, pinning him firmly to the ground. 3 arrows in a row. Who is it? Luo Sha's pupils suddenly shrank and she roared crazily. Just when he roared, the hairs all over his body suddenly stood up, and the terrifying chill actually appeared on his back. His strong desire to survive forced him to stop his steps and mobilize all his strength to defend himself. The blue light passed in front of him, smashing the lower limbs of a sand shinobi next to him, and his internal organs and intestines spilled all over the floor. The air was deathly silent, leaving only the screams of sand shinobi who did not die immediately on the ground. No one dared to act rashly, the Adam's apple rolled, and the sound of swallowing saliva kept coming. The strong chill has been shrouding them, fearing that the blue light representing death will fall on their heads in the next second, and they can only watch Shantu escape from under their noses. It wasn't until a long time later that Lan Mang didn't appear, that they breathed a sigh of relief. Should have left. Sand shinobi swallowed and stammered. I don't know. A sand shinobi looked horrified and carefully wiped the sweat from his forehead. Luo Sha spread out the alluvial gold defense wrapped around him, and coldly ordered, go and check the situation. The other party should have left. Yes. Seeing that Luo Sha had given up his defense, the remaining sand shinobi could only walk over to investigate. It's a bow and arrow. A sand shinobi held up what he found, which was a slender metal arrow with a flat body, slightly different from regular arrows. Bow and arrow. Luo Sha narrowed his eyes slightly. What kind of ninjutsu could actually make bows and arrows so powerful? Moreover, while fighting, they were also observing the changes around them. There were no ninjas within at least 1 kilometer. Could it be that the attack was launched from a range of 1 kilometer? How can this be? Rasa, I think you need to think carefully about how to explain to Kage-sama. This mission was a complete failure. Next to him, Yi Kang looked at him indifferently. The relationship between the two had always been at odds. If Kage hadn't ordered Luo Sha to lead the team, she would never have followed his command. Rasa's face was quite ugly, and Shantu ran away, which meant that Tsuchikage would definitely know what they did today, and I'm afraid Sunagaku village would suffer a big loss. Who is it? He gritted his teeth. On a big tree 1 kilometer away, Hyuga put down the metal crossbow in his hand, and the corner of his mouth curled up. In the forest, Aburame swallowed slightly and looked dumbfounded at Hyuga Satoru holding a bow and arrow next to him. Satoru, your move is too cruel. From a distance of 1 kilometer, he shot 3 arrows in succession, killing several sand shinobi. Even he had to be shocked by this kind of achievement. Especially the second arrow, which hit the sand shinobi group, directly penetrated 3. Hyuga Satoru looked pale as if he had consumed too much, put the metal bow back into the storage scroll, shook his head and said, Teacher Jiwei, now is not the time to discuss this matter. My chakra is almost reaching its limit. It's better to leave quickly. Aburame Jiwei nodded, and after simply dealing with the surrounding traces, he and Hyuga Satoru left here in a hurry. Hostile. The proprietress Honge was restless and paced back and forth. When she saw the two coming, her eyes lit up and she walked over immediately. How's it going? It has ended, Hyuga Satoru said. It's over. Hong Ji's eyes widened. What do you mean it's over? Has the mission been completed? Did Iwa Ninja bring the supplies back? What happened? She is now full of questions. The mission has been solved, Red Pigeon. I will report your credit to Hokage when I return. After completing the task, Aburame Jiwei felt much better and nodded to the landlady. As this solved, Honge opened her mouth wide, but there were still questions in her heart. Didn't it mean that Sunagaku village was involved behind this matter? Is it over like this? There wasn't even a speck of dust on their bodies, and neither of them seemed to have fought with the enemy. Could it be that they just walked around the scene and the mission was completed? Aburame Jiwei saw Honge's doubts, smiled and said, This mission is really thanks to Wu, otherwise it would be troublesome, but because of the confidential nature of the mission, I can't tell you the details. Enlightenment. Hong Jie looked at Hyuga Satoru aside in confusion. Such a young ninja doesn't even look like a chunin, right? Can it play such a big role? After bidding farewell to the Red Pigeon, the two embarked on the journey back to Konoha village. On the way, Aburame Jawei said in a deep voice. Satoru, because this mission involves two major countries, after going back and reporting it to Hokage, it will definitely be upgraded to S level. S level. Hyuga Satoru's eyes lit up. S's mission bounty was at least 1 million taels. This is a huge sum of money. Correct. Aburame paused slightly and continued. After I go back, I will discuss it with Hokage and give you a chance to choose the forbidden technique in the Book of Sealing. You might as well think about it now and decide which forbidden technique to choose. The art of sealing. Hyuga Satoru smacked his lips. All those recorded on it were powerful forbidden arts, and there happened to be a very famous one among them. He had been coveting it for a long time. After several days of traveling, the two finally arrived at Konoha village. Upon arriving at the village, Aburame Jawei didn't waste any time and immediately took Hyuga Satoru to the Hokage room to report the mission. After listening to Aburame Shiwei's report, Sarutobi Hiruzen's eyes gradually brightened and he said, "Good, 3 times in a row. If Aburame's report is true, then after this mission, Iwagakure village will have a big feud with Sunagakure village. 7 elite ninjas and supplies worth more than 100 million taels. Based on his understanding of Onoki's stubborn old man, this feud it's impossible not to retaliate. In this case, Konoha will become a safe party for the time being. Even if the situation in the ninja world becomes chaotic again and a war breaks out, the first ones to fight will be Sunagakure village and Iwagakure village, while Konoha can sit on the sidelines and watch." Sarutobi Hiruzen touched his beard and looked at Hyuga Satoru with more and more admiration. The originally complicated situation, under his stirring, turned into the most beneficial situation for Konoha. Hyuga Satoru smiled coquettishly. In fact, his starting point was not in Konoha village. The reason why he wanted Shantu to go back alive was because he knew that when the Third World War broke out, it was Sunagakure village head Tetsu who first attacked Konoha, which triggered the conflict between Sunagakure and Iwagakure, which should greatly delay the Third War. The time when the war broke out. At least at this time, the worried Sunagakure should have no intention of causing trouble to Big Brother. Then you can get more development time. Time is what he lacks most. Sarutobi Hiruzen nodded and said solemnly, "I have a general understanding of the mission. The mission level has been upgraded to S level. In addition," he looked at Hyuga Satoru, paused and said, "Because of your outstanding performance in this mission, I will reward you with an opportunity to select the sealed book ninjutsu. I hope you will not waste it." Hyuga Satoru's eyes lit up. It's coming, it's finally coming." Sarutobi Hiruzen took out a scroll from the drawer and handed it to Hyuga Satoru. "This is the catalog of the sealed book ninjutsu. You choose the one you like, and I will take you to the place where the sealed book is actually kept later." Hyuga Satoru quickly scanned the catalog and quickly selected his favorite ninjutsu. "This." He pointed it out to Sarutobi Hiruzen. "This." Sarutobi Hiruzen couldn't help but frown. "Why did you choose this technique? This opportunity is very important. If it is wasted, it will be difficult to get it again." After Aburame Jawei saw the ninjutsu chosen by Hyuga Satoru, he couldn't help but become anxious and hurriedly advised. "Woo, this technique has very high requirements for practitioners. Are you sure you want to choose this technique? It would be a pity if you waste this opportunity." Hyuga Satoru looked at Sarutobi Hiruzen firmly and said, "I have made up my mind, Hokage-sama, I choose this ninjutsu." "Okay, now that you have decided." Sarutobi Hiruzen sighed, "But I want to remind you that if you want to practice this technique, you must have a large amount of chakra reserves. Remember not to use it forcefully before you fully master it, otherwise it will be life-threatening." "I understand, Hokage-sama." Hyuga Satoru nodded solemnly. In the catalog of the sealed book, the ninjutsu he was pointing to was the future prince's signature plugin. Multiple shadow clone techniques. Not long after leaving the Hokage room, they met Uchiha Rin and Anko, who had been waiting for their return. "Your mission is finally completed. After waiting for so long, my body is almost rusty." Uchiha circled his shoulders a few times and said very impatiently. Hyuga Satoru smiled, scratched his head and said, "There were some sudden changes in this mission. The level was upgraded to S level, which delayed a lot of time. After the bounty is exchanged, I will treat everyone to a meal." S level. Uchiha Rin opened her mouth in shock, wondering if she heard wrongly. You and Teacher Jue completed an S-level mission. Yes. Aburame nodded slightly and said solemnly. Not only that, Satoru also played a leading role in this mission. Uchiha looked at Hyuga in shock. Even if she was conceited, she knew very well that with her own strength, there was no way she could play any role in an S-level mission. Hongdu was also shocked, and opened her mouth wide. Then she seemed to have thought of something, and said with some worry, "The mission is so dangerous, no one was injured." Aburame shook his head slightly and looked at Hyuga Satoru with some helplessness. He really couldn't understand why Hyuga Satoru wasted such an important opportunity on multiple shadow clone techniques. You must know that the multiple shadow clone technique is not particularly powerful among the forbidden techniques in the Book of Sealing, and the conditions for use are quite harsh. But Hyuga Satoru couldn't wait any longer. After saying goodbye to a few people, he immediately ran to the forest where he usually practiced. He had a very operation to test. The practice of multiple shadow clone techniques is not difficult, and it is not much more difficult than ordinary shadow clone techniques. In the original work, the prince is not even a genin. He walked around in the forest for a night holding the sealed book, and then he developed multiple shadow clone and beat up Mizuki. You can imagine how difficult it is to practice. The reason why it is classified as a forbidden technique is because splitting a large number of shadow clone at one time will cause the ninja's chakra to be exhausted very quickly, and eventually the ninja will be squeezed alive. One shadow clone will take away half of the chakra of the body, and two bodies will only have a quarter of the chakra left. The horror of multiple shadow clone techniques consuming chakra can be seen in Madara. Chakra is extracted from physical strength and mental strength. Only Naruto's wall-mounted wall hanging with its own whirlpool physique and 9 tails can use it all the time. If you encounter Kakashi, you will lose every drop in 2 blows. No more left. Unfortunately, I am also a wall hanger. Hyuga smiled and said. Although he does not have a vortex constitution, he has a life magnetic field. Because of the existence of the life magnetic field, his physical state will spontaneously adjust to the optimal level. Once too much is squeezed out at one time, the life magnetic field will work hard to make up for the loss. In addition, due to the feedback from the strong life magnetic field, his chakra capacity has always far exceeded that of ninjas of the same level, probably close to Jonin's level. With the addition of this buff, it can be said that there is still a long way to go before multiple shadow clone techniques can drain him. Thinking of this, Hyuga took a deep breath and began to practice multiple shadow clone. The way chakra circulates is similar to that of shadow clone, except that when it is released, it goes through several complicated steps, which doubles the release path, thus greatly increasing the number of shadow clone. Second generation is really a genius. How did he come up with this ingenious way of flowing chakra? Hyuga Satoru couldn't help but admire. When the chakra reached its peak, he formed a seal with his hands and shouted out the classic line. Multiple shadow clone techniques. Bang, bang, bang. As waves of white mist rose, a bunch of identical versions of himself appeared next to Hyuga Satoru, glaring at each other. His body seemed to be hollowed out, and Hyuga Satoru felt an empty feeling in his abdomen. Before he could do anything, he heard a sudden noise around him. Hey, why did I see so many ugly guys when I opened my eyes? Asshole, who are you calling ugly? Don't you look at yourself, your eyes are like projectiles. X10. You guy, do you want to be beaten? X10. Come just come, whoever is afraid of whom. X20. Listening to dozens of people around him yelling at each other in unison, Hyuga Satoru felt his head was spinning. I didn't expect that the multiple shadow clone technique would have such drawbacks, but recalling it carefully, it seemed that the prince had quarreled with his clones many times. Especially when they were practicing the spiral shuriken, a group of shadow clones started to play with each other, laughing at the slow-moving clones and almost started to each other. Back then, Hyuga Satoru almost fainted from laughing in front of the TV. He didn't expect that this scene would happen to him now. Don't argue anymore. I summoned you. I am the true body. You must listen to me. Unable to bear it, Hyuga Satoru scolded him and finally calmed down the noise around him. The true body. Well, since you are the true body, let's judge Lee. Is he uglier? Nonsense, he is obviously uglier, his nose is almost reaching the sky. Seeing the quarrel between the clones getting more and more intense, Hyuga Satoru took out a scroll and threw it into the air. The white mist dispersed, and he saw countless shurikens, kunai ninja swords and other metal ninja tools suddenly falling from the air, as if there was a rain. A rain of metal fell in front of the clone. This scene shocked all the clones, and they suddenly became quiet. So amazing. Hyuga Satoru took a long breath and said, "You try to use your consciousness to communicate with the metal ninja tools in front of you and see if you can control them." Is that so? A smart clone tried it a few times and gradually found a way. Amid everyone's envious looks, the shuriken in front of them flew up precariously. Hyuga Satoru breathed a sigh of relief. As he expected, the multiple shadow clone technique can also use the ability of electromagnetic force. He has used shadow clone to practice electromagnetic force before, so he speculates that multiple shadow clones should be able to do the same. Seeing that someone had already learned it, the other clones were not to be outdone and began to roll up one after another. "How can we repair it? I won't fall behind. It's time for you to see real technology. Move, move, move for me." Seeing that the clone rolled up on its own, Hyuga Satoru looked happy. He built a chair with metal ninja tools and leaned on it with his legs crossed. Experience value added by 56. Experience value plus 59. Experience value added by 61. Seeing that the experience points were rising steadily, Hyuga Satoru felt happy all over. Just as he envisioned, the multiple shadow clone techniques can share the experience gained from training with the main body. And it should be due to Cheat's upgrade method. This experience can be obtained without the clone disappearing. Upgrading LV2's electromagnetic force requires 6,000 experience points. He now has a total of 5,021 experience points, which is about 1,000 points short of being upgraded. If nothing else, the period of time before the next mission should be enough for him to upgrade to LV3. I remember that in the original book, when the prince was practicing the spiral shuriken, he recruited thousands of subordinates. With the buff bonus of shared experience, the progress of the training increased like a rocket. Hyuga Satoru also knew this, so he chose the multiple shadow clone technique. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something and showed a strange expression. "Am I stuck with Cheat Bug? Who cares?" Hyuga Satoru looked relieved and lay comfortably on the chair. The bug was not stuck, and his brain was not normal. Around him, dozens of clones were like a bunch of green leeks, constantly glowing and heating up, sucked out of their blood and flesh by him, the capitalist. One of the clones shook his hand, and his sword flew sideways, just hitting the clone that was scolding him just now. "Grandmas, let me play in the underworld, right?" The clone pointed at the other person and cursed angrily, but as soon as he finished speaking, he heard a bang and turned into white mist and dissipated. After all, it's still a shadow clone, and the property that it explodes when you poke it cannot be changed. Hyuga Satoru frowned slightly, suppressing the impact of the memory that had just returned, forming seals with his hands, and mobilizing the newly recovered chakra. The white mist dissipated, and another batch of green leeks grew. After using multiple shadow clone techniques to block the bug for a long time, Hyuga Satoru finally felt a crisp sound coming from his body, as if something was broken. Electromagnetic LV3, 20,000 experience points until next upgrade. Finally upgraded, Hyuga took a deep breath and smiled. While upgrading, the first thing you feel is the quenching of your body. The impurities in your body are constantly decomposed and reorganized, turning into extremely pure life energy and feeding it back to your body. What is different from the past is that this time the quenching is more thorough, and even the internal organs and other organs have been quenched. Hyuga Satoru opened his Byakugan, his field of vision increased from the previous 3 kilometers to 4 kilometers, and the picture transmitted back was much clearer. The speed of gaining experience has slowed down. It seems that the electromagnetic force of LV3 will be a bit difficult to upgrade if it is so stuck. Sensing the slowdown in the increase in experience points in his mind, Hyuga Satoru curled his lips helplessly. According to his previous experience, as the level of electromagnetic force increases, the experience value brought by using previous abilities will decrease. If you want to upgrade quickly, you have to use newly developed capabilities. Feeling the increased authority of the electromagnetic force, Hyuga Satoru took a breath and slowly raised his hands. The surrounding leek clones were stunned, suddenly realizing that they had lost control of the metal ninja tool in front of them, and their own will to control the ninja tool was as powerless as mayfly shaking a tree when encountering that strong force. The shurikens, kunai ninja swords and other ninja tools all flew up and gathered in the sky in front of Hyuga Satoru. In the shocked eyes of the leak clones, the surface of the metal ninja tools suddenly gradually turned red. At the same time, the surroundings, the air also began to heat up. What happened? Why do you feel so hot all of a sudden? The clone suddenly opened its eyes wide and made a burst of shocked noises. The surfaces of those metal ninja tools have turned red, and the hot breath even made the plants on the ground begin to wither. The solid state turned into a liquid, making a sizzling sound, and pools of blazing red molten iron condensed into a huge sphere, constantly squirming. Hyuga Satoru took a deep breath, mobilized the remaining chakra, and controlled the shape change of the molten iron. The red liquid was elongated, forming a slender blade with a certain curvature, and then the details of the handle and blade. In the end, the molten iron of nearly 100 ninja tools turned into a slender ninja sword with a slender blade that exuded bursts of cold light. Looking at his masterpiece, Hyuga Satoru showed a smile on his pale face. Let's call this ninja sword Nagato. Next to him, the clone was already stunned. Hyuga looked over and snapped his fingers. Thank you for your hard work this time. I look forward to the opportunity to cooperate next time. As the sound of bang 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 continued to sound, all the clones turned into white mist and dissipated at the same time. As the clones dissipated, Hyuga Satoru immediately gritted his teeth. All the memories and fatigue of the clones returned together, making him feel instantly overwhelmed, and large drops of sweat fell from his forehead. I didn't expect the impact after recycling to be so big. It seems that the bug is not that easy to deal with, but it can be recycled in batches to slow down the impact. After taking a few deep breaths, Hyuga said helplessly. The electromagnetic force of LV3 and the speed of gaining experience points have slowed down. If you want to be as stuck as before, you have to let the clone use more advanced abilities. Then the fatigue that returns together will definitely make you tired and unable to move for several days. However, if you have enough rest time, you can use a wave of clones to gather wool from time to time. In this case, the time it takes him to reach LV4 will be much shorter than normal. Holding the long Fang ninja sword that had cooled down, Hyuga Satoru tried to slash it a few times, and it felt very good. This ninja sword was made by fusing hundreds of ninja tools together and continuously compressing the gaps between molecules. The quality is very high, and it is made by myself. The shape of the knife is very suitable for him in every aspect. Induction furnace. This is Hyuga Satoru's name for his new ability to develop electromagnetic power at level 3. The so-called electromagnetic furnace uses a magnetic field to cause the molecules of an object to move at extremely high speeds, causing the surrounding temperature to rise sharply. The principle is not complicated. Hyuga Satoru remembers that induction cookers and microwave ovens in previous lives used this principle. Junior high school physics tells us that temperature will intensify the movement between molecules, and similarly, the intensification of movement between molecules will also cause the temperature to rise rapidly. Not just for metal, if a ninja steps into the electromagnetic furnace built by Hyuga Satoru, the molecules of the body will violently collide uncontrollably, and may eventually melt into a puddle of liquid alive. Hyuga Satoru exhaled, with a hint of expectation in his eyes. If I can develop an electromagnetic furnace, then I am not far away from the ability to reorganize matter. Material reorganization is the electromagnetic force system ability that Hyuga Satoru wants to obtain most. It can control the rearrangement and combination of atoms from the microscopic level to create new matter. In his idea, if he could master this ability, he could invade the caged bird on his forehead from its source and directly erase it. The caged bird thing has been threatening him for a long time, and no one wants to have such a thing on their forehead. The electromagnetic furnace can accelerate the movement of molecules, which has essentially reached the microscopic level. At least from this moment on, the microscopic capabilities of the electromagnetic force system have opened the door to him. After reaching electromagnetic force LV3, Hyuga Satoru roughly estimated his current strength. In terms of close combat, due to the weirdness of his abilities, ordinary Jonin may not be his opponent. If it is a long-range attack, it is a bit expensive for regular ninjas to kill them randomly under the long-range explosive sniper of the magnetic storm sniper. The next day, according to the agreement with Aburame Jawei, Hyuga Satoru came to the task management office, intending to take on a team task with the team. Satoru, you're late. In front of the mission management office, Aburame Jawei looked at Hyuga Satoru walking in the distance. A rare ripple appeared on his paralyzed face wearing sunglasses. I'm sorry, something delayed me a bit. Hyuga scratched his hair in embarrassment. He stayed up late last night because he was testing new abilities. When Hyuga Satoru walked in, Aburame Jawei suddenly let out a light sigh, with a trace of surprise in his eyes. Enko and Uchiha Rin next to them also seemed to have discovered something. They put their faces next to Hyuga Satoru and looked at Hyuga Satoru up and down with suspicious expressions. What happened? Hyuga Satoru subconsciously took a few steps back and stammered. He suddenly felt like he had turned into a pitiful little white rabbit, while the two women next to him were like big bad wolves. Satoru, you seem to have turned white again. Enko gritted her teeth, with a look of envy and jealousy on her face. Well, it's still white and rosy. Uchiha Rin's eyes gradually narrowed, and a cold breath emanated from him. Is it possible that you have any hidden beauty secrets? Turned white and rosy. Hyuga Satoru is about to cry without tears. Who knew that electromagnetic forces body quenching has such an effect? Judging from the current situation, if he doesn't hand over the so-called beauty secrets, I'm afraid it's impossible to let the two women go easily. He did. Do you believe me when I say this is talent? Hyuga swallowed. I believe you. Give me your beauty secrets. Uchiha Rin grabbed Hyuga Satoru's collar. Hongdu next to her also lifted up her clothes and looked aggressive. Okay, you have realized this. Before, I thought there must be something wrong with your sudden whitening of your skin. I blamed magnet style. Now I have nothing to say. Please hand over your beauty secrets. Unexpectedly, even the always aloof Uchiha Rin was white and helpless, so Hyuga Satoru had no choice but to turn his attention to Aburame Jawei for help. Unexpectedly, Aburame Jawei didn't want to get involved at all. He shrugged and went to scan the task list on the task notice next to him. After Aburame Jawei made a selection, his eyes stopped on a task. Escorting the caravan to the Grass Country Chamber of Commerce. The level is B, and the bounty is 400,000 taels. Logically speaking, the bounty for B-level tasks is not usually so high, but this task seems a bit special. The scale of the caravan is very large, and when the task is released, it is specified that multiple teams can take it, so the rewards given are quite generous. Aburame Jawei thought for a moment and decided to take on this task. This mission is the one with the highest reward among the missions that their team can take. Even if you exclude the portion taken by other teams, it is still quite considerable. Although he himself is not short of money, it is naturally a good plan to let Hyuga Satoru and others pay more. Hello, help me take this task. Aburame Jawei pointed at the tasks on the list expressionlessly and said to the ninja in the management office. It's Lord Jawei, I'll take action immediately. The ninja from the management office responded and immediately recorded it. Aburame Jawei thought for a moment and asked, besides our team, is there any other team that has taken on this mission? The person in charge thought for a while. There should be another team, but I don't remember which team it is. Is that so? Aburame Ji nodded slightly and looked back at Enko and the others. I saw Hyuga Satoru standing in the middle with disheveled clothes. Next to him, Uchiha Rin and Enko, who were searching unsuccessfully for whitening secrets, seemed to be muttering something in a low voice. Sensing Hyuga's resentful gaze, Aburame Jawei suddenly felt a chill coming over him. The mission has been taken over, let's go there quickly. He said with a shudder. At the entrance of Konoha village, Hyuga Satoru looked over from a distance and saw a large motorcade parked there. After getting closer, I suddenly heard a quarrel. Several people frowned and quickened their pace, and a surprising scene came into view. I saw a tall ninja wearing green tights, bowing to one of them, saying various words of apology and begging, while the ninja wearing the same type of tights next to him kept pulling him. Father, why do you have to apologize to this kind of person? In the worst case, we won't do this task anymore. Kai, you don't understand. Without the bounty from this mission, we would hardly be able to survive. After scolding the ninja who pulled him, the tall ninja bowed to the leader Jonin again and buried his head deeply into his chest. Please forgive me. I promise not to make similar mistakes again. After seeing the man's face clearly, Hyuga Satoru was stunned. Senior Dai. Satoru, do you know that ninja? Uchiha looked at him in surprise. A trace of worry appeared in Anko's eyebrows next to her, and she explained to Uchiha Rin, his name is Matt Dai, and he is the father of our classmate Matt Kai. Oh, Uchiha Rin responded. She had no impression of Matt Kai, but she felt a little familiar. In fact, she basically didn't care too much about the weaker students in the class. At this moment, Jonin, who was standing in front of Matt Dai, showed an impatient look, waved his hand towards Matt Dai and said, let's go, let's go. It's unlucky for me to recruit you two guys into the team, middle. Isn't it just that I overturned a cargo box? We have already packed it up, why are we so aggressive? Matt Kai next to him finally couldn't help it anymore, clenching his fists and glaring at the Jonin. Matt Dai grabbed him and said anxiously, it's not easy for us to join the team. It's because I'm clumsy. Please apologize to Captain Ryosuke. Kai looked aggrieved and almost cried, but we have already sorted it out. After roughly hearing the whole story, a trace of anger appeared in Hongdo's eyes. It's too much. Hyuga frowned, and after thinking for a moment, he quickly walked over. Hey, have you guys discussed it yet? Our caravan is about to leave. If we continue like this, it will delay our trip. Hearing the impatient voice of the caravan leader, Jonin, the leader named Ryosuke Tanuki, showed an apologetic smile and said a little embarrassedly, I'm very sorry. We will take care of it right away. His eyes turned to Matt Dai and the two, and suddenly they turned into disgust and disgust. Have you heard that the caravan is about to set off? You'd better leave quickly. Don't delay the caravan's schedule. At this moment, a voice came from behind. Wait. Ryosuke Tanuki looked over, his brows suddenly furrowed, and he rolled his eyes. Hyuga's ninja, what are you doing here? Hyuga Satoru smiled slightly at the bewildered Met Kai duo. Kai, have you graduated? Are you, Hyuga Satoru? After recognizing Hyuga Satoru, Kai scratched his head in embarrassment. I just graduated and haven't been assigned to lead Jonin yet, so I went out with my father to do missions to support the family. Why are you here too? I'm also here to complete the mission. Hyuga smiled and said. He is. His name is Hyuga Satoru. He is my classmate at the same time. Father, you should have heard of him, the genius of the Hyuga family who awakened the second bloodstain. Kai introduced to Dai with an excited look. Although the two of them didn't have much contact when they were classmates, they always impressed everyone as a wealthy genius with 2 bloodstains. That's him. Matt Dai made a fist with his right hand and slapped it on the palm of his left hand, showing a relieved look. After hearing the conversation between the two, Tanuki Ryosuke also narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at Hyuga Satoru up and down. Although he had never heard of double bloodstains, the watermelon head just said that they were classmates at the same time, so this guy is the same. I'm a kid who just graduated. Hey, did you just say that you were also here to complete a mission? Ryosuke squinted at Hyuga Satoru. This mission is a multi-team mission. We also accepted it. Is there any problem? Hyuga Satoru also stared at him. Besides, he turned to look at Matt and Dai, and said with a smile, Senior Dai, Kai, since this team doesn't want to keep you, why not go to my team? Woo, how is this possible? Dai and Kai were at a loss. A coldness flashed in Ryosuke Tanuki's eyes. Kid, you said you took this mission, do you have any evidence? This is a B-level mission. If I were your leader Jonin, I would never let you come over to cause trouble. You. Before he finished speaking, he heard a cold voice suddenly come from him. Are you teaching me how to do things? Tanuki Ryosuke was stunned for a moment, and looked towards the position of the voice. He saw a ninja wearing black sunglasses and wrapped in a wide robe, holding a task authorization form facing him. This is the letter of authorization for us to accept the mission. It can be regarded as evidence. In addition, I agree that the two of them will join my team. Do you have any objections? After seeing the appearance of the person clearly, Tanuki Ryosuke's body suddenly began to tremble uncontrollably, a look of fear appeared in his eyes, and he stammered. It turns out, it's Mr. Jawei. You should have told me earlier. How could I have any objection to you? Just kidding, do you dare to have an opinion on Aburame Jiwei? Aburame Shiwei has a great reputation in the Konoha Jonin circle, and he is a super ruthless person. Normally, Jonin is just a food delivery person in front of him, and the ninjas who fight with him have an extremely miserable end, and they are eaten by insects without even leaving their dregs. Tanuki Ryosuke looked at Hyuga Satoru with tears in his eyes. You said earlier that your teacher was Aburame Shiwei. Do I deserve to offend this ruthless person? It's over. Do you want to live in another village in the future? After seeing Aburame Jiwei coming over, Hyuga Satoru breathed a sigh of relief, smiled at Madan Dai and said, Senior Dai, since my teacher has agreed, then you can join my team. Matt Dai looked hesitantly at Ryosuke Tanuki, who was about to cry without tears and wanted to put his head in his stomach. What do you want me to do? If people want you to go, go ahead. If Aburame Jiwei cares about me, he won't find an opportunity to do it with me on the way, right? Seeing that Ryosuke Tanuki had no objection, Matt Dai suddenly had a sore nose and tears filled his eyes for a moment. He couldn't help but step forward and hugged Hyuga Satoru. Wow, thank you so much, my youthful blood is burning warmly again. Hyuga Satoru subconsciously shrank back to prevent Matt Dai from throwing tears on his clothes. This scene happened to be seen by Anko and Uchiha Rin, who were walking behind. Satoru, when did you become so caring? Uchiha Rin showed a complicated expression. It seems that I have underestimated this guy. In addition to having a huge appetite and being lazy to cook, this guy is also quite sunny. His body was forcibly held by Matt Dai's big hands, and Hyuga Satoru felt like he could hardly breathe. Dai, Senior Dai, please be gentle. Ah, I'm so sorry, Satoru. Matt Dai hurriedly let go of Hyuga Satoru and took a step back with an apologetic look. Hyuga Satoru breathed a sigh of relief, and just as he was about to speak, he saw Matt Dai and Kai suddenly hugging each other, kneeling on the ground, and burst into tears. Kai, did you hear that? Someone actually invited us to join the team. Yes, father, I'm so touched. This is youth. Kai, let the eternal fire of youth burn again. Yes, father. The atmosphere suddenly became awkward. Uchiha Rin helplessly covered his face with his palms and sighed, I take back what I just said. Satoru will let these two freaks join the team. There will be no problems. Probably not. Hongdu smiled awkwardly. Although Kai's character is a bit strange, he is still very reliable at critical times. At this moment, Taro Iyama, the leader of the caravan, stammered, well, can we set off? In fact, he was already very impatient just now, but when he saw Ryosuke Jonin's behavior towards the new Aburame Jiwei, he was suddenly shocked. This ninja named Aburame Shiwei actually makes Ryosuke Jonin so respected and even a little afraid. Then his strength and status should be very high, right? You must not offend him. Therefore, he forced the entire caravan to watch Dai and Kai's bloody performance. Yeah, seeing everyone around him looking at him, Aburame nodded slightly. In the forest of the country of fire, a large caravan was traveling on the road opened in the forest. Inside this caravan, two completely different states suddenly appeared at this moment. Come, Lord Jiwei, this is a watermelon produced in the country of grass. It is very sweet. Please try it. Lord Jiwei, this is the specialty of the Iron Country, soy sauce beef. It is very delicious. Lord Jiwei, this is. I saw a group of people in the caravan surrounding Aburame Jiwei, offering all kinds of delicacies and delicacies. However, in Ryosuke's team on the other side of the caravan, the situation was completely opposite. Taking a bite of the dry food in his hand, Kento looked at the beautiful thing next to Aburame Jiwei, his eyes almost turned green. This group of caravan fools have been trying to please us all the time before the small team came. It's a good thing now that they all ran away. Kento, please keep your voice down. Ryusuke shuddered and immediately scolded in a low voice, if Aburame Shiwei hears it, we will be doomed. Kento shrank when he heard this. Master Ryusuke, is that Aburame Shiwei really that scary? You are also a Jonin, how can you be so afraid of him? It's not fear. Ryusuke looked around and whispered, this is respect, respect for the strong. You are a Chunin and you don't understand. Aburame Jiwei is very famous in the Jonin circle. It is said that in Anbu, he performed a mission of narrow escape and gained the title of Almighty Ninja. He has been acting alone. No ninja can leave a whole corpse under his hands. I really didn't expect that he would come out to lead the team. Otherwise, I would never have offended him and made him miss me. It will definitely be the most terrifying memory in my life. After hearing Ryosuke's introduction to Aburame Shiwei, Kento suddenly shuddered and swallowed. On the other side, Aburame Jiwei frowned impatiently and ignored a group of flattering caravan members around him. See Gui, no wonder even Ryosuke Jonin respects him so much. It seems that this kind of thing cannot catch the eyes of Lord Jiwei at all. That's right, Master Jiwei is too aloof. Is this the nature of a strong person? Master Jiwei's aura of looking up at the mountain makes us admire him endlessly. The caravan members immediately turned into sycophants, surrounding Aburame Jiwei with a rainbow fart, almost causing Hyuga Satoru to vomit. Have you ever thought about the possibility that Teacher Jiwei is ignoring you because he is afraid of society? Hyuga Satoru knows very well that Aburame Jiwei, who seems to be cold and invincible, actually suffers from severe social anxiety and becomes numb when there are many people. He knew very well that Aburame Jiwei's inner words must be, "Why are you all surrounding me? Is there a pockmark on my face? Don't look at me, don't look at me. I hate it, leave now." Hyuga Satoru took a deep breath, and a flash of light burst out in his eyes. So let me, a good student who respects his teacher and respects him, save the teacher from the sea of suffering. If I don't go to hell, who will? Hyuga Satoru instantly transformed into a social nerd, rushed forward, and grabbed the watermelon handed to him by the caravan members. Wow, is this the legendary big watermelon produced in the land of grass? It sure has a lot of water. Hey, this special sauce beef from the Iron Country has such a strong aroma, wouldn't it be too much for me to try? There is also this, bring it to you. Caravan members. When they came to their senses, they looked at Hyuga Satoru, who was holding a watermelon and munching furiously, with a trace of anger on his face, but Aburame Jiwei didn't say anything and they couldn't speak. Hey, Rin, Anko, and Senior Wandai, you guys should also try it. Eating melon is a beautiful thing. Hyuga Satoru's mouth was surrounded by watermelon flesh, and he waved to the people behind him. Uchiha Rin and Anko were stunned and opened their mouths. Satoru, it's really surprising. I hope those people in the caravan won't be angry. The mission has just begun. If you cause trouble, you will be in trouble. Uchiha Rin helplessly held his forehead. Unlike Anko and Uchiha Rin, who were reserved, Matt Dai and Kai didn't notice anything. They immediately rushed to Hyuga Satoru's side, holding a piece of watermelon and started chewing it. Delicious. I'm so touched that Wu actually shared such a precious delicacy with us. The fire of youth in my body is burning again. Throwing away the finished watermelon rind in their hands, Dai and Kai hugged each other and cried. When the people in Ryosuke's team saw this scene, their eyelids jumped, and they felt that the dry food in their hands suddenly lost its flavor. Is that correct? This is what we dedicate to Master Jiwei. How can this be done? It's too much. That is. Seeing Hyuga Satoru mistreating the food he sent, the caravan members couldn't help but grit their teeth. The leader, Taro Iyama, winked at them and spoke in a low voice. Since they are Master Jiwei's students, it is the same for them to eat. As long as they can leave a good impression in Master Jiwei's mind, safety will be guaranteed if he takes action during the subsequent trip. Hearing this, the caravan members nodded, with a smile on their faces. In any case, their goal has been achieved. I believe that after giving away so much delicious food and touting it, Lord Jiwei's favorability towards them has been maxed out, right? Later, when the caravan encounters danger, Lord Jiwei will not stand idly by. Thinking of this, these people finally returned to their posts with satisfaction. On the side, Aburame Jiwei's trembling fists in his wide sleeves finally relaxed, and he let out a long breath. Just a little bit, he was about to have an attack and wanted to feed all these people to bugs. I really don't understand why these people are still pestering him when he has made it clear that he doesn't need it anymore. Dealing with people is really troublesome. Compared with that, killing people is much easier. Aburame Jiwei shook his head helplessly. After adjusting his emotions, he looked at Hyuga Satoru's position, who was walking side by side with Mad Dai, happily devouring the food in his hands. There was a hint of curiosity in his eyes, and he thought to himself, Satoru must have his own plan for letting the two of them join the team, right? What could it be? After finishing the watermelon in his hand, Hyuga Satoru threw the watermelon rind behind the road and wiped his mouth with satisfaction. Senior Dai, Kai, are you full? I'm full, I'm full. The two of them rubbed their bellies comfortably. Dai looked at Hyuga Satoru with a sheepish expression. Satoru, thank you so much this time. Not only did you let us join the team, but you also gave us such good food. I don't know how to repay you. Senior Dai is out of touch when he says this. Kai is my classmate, so I should help you. Hyuga Satoru showed a sunny smile, paused, and added, but speaking of which, I really have a question about cultivation that I want to ask Senior. Cultivation? I'm just a genin. I'm afraid I can't guide you. Matt Dai hesitated. It's okay, as long as Senior Dai is willing to give guidance. Okay, as long as I can help, you can ask whatever you want. Dai said with a grin. Hyuga Satoru raised the corners of his mouth slightly. It was as easy as imagined. In the eyes of others, Maito Dai is just an ordinary genin, but only he knows how terrifying this 10,000 years genin is. The strongest person in the caravan is not Aburame Jawei, but Matt Dai after opening 8 gates. In the original work, the 7 ninja swordsmen were kicked from a fruit basket into 3 auspicious treasures. The 3 people who were lucky enough to save their lives were so frightened that they did not dare to step into the land of fire for the rest of their lives. One can imagine how terrifying Matt Dai is after opening 8 gates. When he saw Matt Dai constantly bowing and apologizing to the leading ninja, Hyuga Satoru felt something inappropriate and strange. From the perspective of electromagnetic perception, the biomagnetic field of Matt Dai who kept humbly apologizing was as scary as the sun. Definitely the one with the strongest biomagnetic field among all the ninjas he met. Not even the Hokage can compare to it. Compared to that, the arrogant Jonin is like a firefly. The strong biomagnetic field is closely related to the strength of the physical body. One can imagine how terrifying Matt Dai's physical body has become after practicing 8 gates Dunjia. After pondering for a while, Hyuga asked, Senior Dai, I have been practicing physical skills recently. When my physical strength is about to be exhausted, I will always vaguely sense certain boundaries, like. After a pause, Hyuga looked at Matt Dai, some kind of shackles that bind the body's strength. Shackles. Kai next to him looked puzzled. Is there such a thing? Why didn't I find it when I was practicing? So you didn't work hard enough, Kai. Matt Dai rolled his eyes at him, and then looked at Hyuga Satoru, with a hint of surprise in his eyes. Satoru, I didn't expect that your talent in physical skills is so high, and you have actually touched the limit of 8 gates. 8 gates. Hyuga Satoru looked at Matt Dai pretending to be confused. Matt Dai has a straightforward personality and has no intention of hiding it. He directly smiled and said, after the body has been trained to a certain extent, you can feel the existence of shackles in the body. These shackles are called 8 gates. Once the shackles are broken, it can explode with extraordinary power. Kai heard Matt Dai's words and looked at Matt Dai with some surprise. He had never heard of this before, and the ninja teacher in the school had never taught this. Will Dad still use this kind of physical skills? Certainly. Matt Dai gave a thumbs up and said, this is the only unique skill I have acquired after 20 years of hard training. I plan to teach it to you after you have grown up for a while. There was a burst of ecstasy in his heart, but Hyuga Satoru didn't show any expression on his face. He looked at Matt Dai with a slight hesitation and asked, although I can feel the shackles, if I break them forcibly, it may cause some damage, right? Matt Dai nodded and looked at Hyuga Satoru. His expression became a little serious. Honestly, I don't recommend that you try to open the 8 gates in your body at this age, but since you can sense the existence of the 8 gates, it means that you should have reached the threshold of practicing 8 gates Dunjia. Matt Dai didn't think about keeping secrets at all, and the 8 gates Dunjia was not a very precious secret skill in his eyes. With his character, Hyuga Satoru helped him because he was kind to him. You must repay. At this moment, after hearing Hyuga Satoru's request for advice, Matt Dai almost immediately explained all the key points of practicing 8 gates dungeon, making Hyuga Satoru immediately enlightened. Thank you, Senior Dai, for your guidance. Hyuga Satoru bowed slightly to Matt Dai gratefully. No. I'm just a genin, and I'm very happy to be able to help you. Besides, you let us join the team, so I should be the one thanking you. Matt Dai was at a loss. Immediately, Hyuga Satoru looked at Metkai seriously. I feel that the 8 Gates Dunjia taught to me by Senior Dai is not as simple as it seems. You must study hard with him. Really, but my father is just a genin. Kai scratched his hair hesitantly. At this time, he had not practiced 8 Gates Dunjia yet, and he still had doubts about this technique. But since Wudu paid so much attention to this technique, he also secretly paid attention to it in his heart. Hyuga Satoru took a breath. After understanding the 8 Gates dungeon training method, he suddenly had a hunch in his heart that after he completed the 8 Gates dungeon training, his strength would undergo some kind of earth-shaking changes. He didn't know the source of this feeling, it was just an intuition. It seems that after this mission is completed, he must find an opportunity to practice 8 Gates Dunjia, he said secretly in his heart. After getting the 8 Gates dungeon training method, Hyuga Satoru returned to the center of the team, and Uchiha Rin came over curiously. Satoru, were you asking Mad Dai for advice just now? But he is just a genin. Because of the distance, she could only see the end of the motorcade. Hyuga Satoru seemed to be asking Mad Dai some questions, but she did not hear the specific content. Don't underestimate Konoha's genin. Hyuga Satoru looked at her deeply. Uchiha Rin, what's so great about Konoha's genin? She looked confused and was about to ask something when Aburame Jawei next to her suddenly stopped and frowned at a forest in the distance. Teacher, what's wrong? Hyuga asked. The bug discovered the ambush. Aburame said solemnly. Hearing this, Hyuga frowned and opened his eyes. The next second, his expression became solemn. Fire Nation Forest. Seeing Jawei's team stopped, the caravan members were stunned for a moment and asked, what's wrong? Hyuga shrugged and said, there is an ambush point 100 meters ahead. If you find it troublesome, you can just rush over. Ambush. Hearing these two words, panic gradually spread among the caravan, and the entire team stopped moving forward and stood in the middle of the road. The caravan leader swallowed and looked at Aburame Jawei tentatively. Lord Jawei, do we need to go around? It doesn't matter, Aburame Jawei said expressionlessly. It doesn't matter. The leader of the caravan was stunned. What does it mean to move forward or not? We have given you so many precious delicacies to please you. You can't just sit idly by and watch. At this moment, a group of ninjas suddenly sprang out of the woods in front of the caravan, holding kunai, with ferocious faces, and their exposed skin covered with scars, and surrounded them with ferocious smiles. It looks like we've been discovered, but it doesn't matter, you can't escape either. Such a large-scale caravan is a big fat sheep. Most of the caravan members were just ordinary people. They had never seen such a scene before. They were so frightened that they almost collapsed. A wandering ninja. Why are there so many wandering ninjas? It's over. Hyuga Satoru narrowed his eyes. The so-called wandering ninjas mostly refer to ninjas who rebel against the village or have no power. Compared with ordinary ninjas, they are much more ferocious because of their year-round wandering. They survive by robbing homes and houses, and they are the most feared by caravans. In the original work, the prince met Zabuza and Haku when he was on his first mission, a pair of wandering ninjas. Judging from the size of the group of wandering ninjas blocking the road, they should be the largest group in the area. Before the Jawei team took action, Ryosuke's team on the other side was already losing their temper. The caravan members' various attempts to please the Jawei team along the way made their anger points almost full. Aren't they just a bunch of wandering ninjas? Kill you. A group of wandering ninjas dared to show off their power in front of Lousy. Captain Ryosuke Tianuki was the first to bear the brunt. He held a kunai and rushed towards the wandering ninja blocking the road, as if he wanted to vent all the anger he had endured along the way. When the other members saw the captain rushing forward, they naturally would not fall behind and rushed forward with a loud shout. I didn't expect Ryosuke Jonin to be so brave. Yes, with Ryosuke's team, we feel at ease. It seems that these wandering ninjas are nothing to worry about. The caravan members immediately breathed a sigh of relief. While admiring, they did not forget to cast their peripheral vision towards the Jawei team. After all, no ninja from the Jawei team had taken action yet. Looking at the incomparably brave Ryosuke team, Hyuga Satoru clicked his tongue a few times. Well, it seems that the one named Ryosuke Tanuki is going to be unlucky. From Byakugan's perspective, he could clearly see that there was a Jonin hidden among the group of wandering ninjas. In terms of chakra power, he was certainly not weak among the Jonin. Tanuki Ryosuke would despise the wandering ninjas. Naturally, the ninja world recognized that the overall quality of the wandering ninjas was weaker than the ninjas of the ninja village, so he regarded these ninjas as a punching bag, but he did not expect that there was a master hidden among them. After all, they don't have his Byakugan in their team, nor does Aburame Jawei's parasitic sense. Satoru, are we going to take action? Uchiha looked at him and asked. If they want to be in the limelight, let them be. Hyuga Satoru shrugged. At this moment, the battle situation suddenly changed. Tanuki Ryosuke, who was originally suppressing the wandering ninja, suddenly felt a chill coming from behind. He was so frightened that he immediately moved his body sideways, and the sharp cold light passed through, directly slicing his lower abdomen. A bloody mouth. Gritting his teeth, Tanuki Ryosuke hurriedly took a few steps back. In the short moment of the confrontation, he realized that the strength of the ninja who took action was definitely not inferior to his. Do Laozi's men enjoy killing? The attacking ninja shook off the remaining blood on his ninja sword. On his face, which was full of flesh, a scar slashed ferociously from his forehead to his chin like a centipede, which made Ryosuke Tanuki, who was being stared at, feel a chill in his heart. I thought they were just a bunch of soft persimmons, how could I meet a tough guy? Before he could react, the wandering ninja's attack came again. The huge ninja sword was powerful and heavy, and kept hitting the kunai he was parrying. The powerful impact made his arms numb, and he could only continue to retreat. After dodging the ninja sword's attack, Tanouchi Ryosuke struggled to look at the positions of his team members. He saw that without his control, the team members who only had the strength of Chunin Genin were suppressed by the wandering ninja and were unable to fight back. Why do I want to be in the limelight? At this moment, he felt like crying without tears, and even wanted to die. Well Satoru, we'd better help them. On the side of the Jawei team, Matt Dai spoke hesitantly. Although he had been humiliated by Ryosuke Tanouchi before, he was kind-hearted and could not do such a thing as watching the ninjas from the same village die. The caravan members were stunned by the sudden turn of events and lacked the energy they had before. Many of them even secretly packed their luggage and considered whether to run away in advance. Hyuga Satoru looked at Aburame Jawei, who just looked at him expressionlessly. Don't delay for too long. Seeing that Aburame Jawei had spoken, Hyuga Satoru gave a loud shout and rushed towards the battlefield. Matt Dai and several others also rushed over at the same time. Under the strong suppression of several people, the wandering ninjas who had originally taken the initiative were retreating steadily. Hyuga Satoru took out a scroll, the white mist dispersed, and he was holding a ninja sword with a long blade in his hand. It's the ninja sword Longtooth that melted when the electromagnetic force was upgraded. The sword swung down, accompanied by the crisp sound of metal collision. The kunai in the hand of the wandering ninja who was in a defensive posture was suddenly broken from the middle, and a ferocious blood mark spread from his forehead to his chest. Hyuga Satoru took a breath. Except for Jonin, who was restrained by Ryosuke Tanuki, the overall strength of this group of wandering ninjas was not high, which was just enough for him to practice sword skills. A strong air flow lingered around Matt Dai's body, and the veins on his forehead popped out, and he kicked the attacking Chunin away with just one kick. It's amazing. Is this the strength of Dad? From behind, Kai looked at Dai who was wrapped in the air waves with admiration. Kai, has this only opened the fourth door? Matt Dai gave a thumbs up to Kai, and the teeth exposed at the corners of his mouth reflected the light. Looking at this scene, Tanuki Ryoji was paralyzed. He did not expect that Aburame Shiwei did not take action, and just a group of genin completely suppressed the group of wandering ninjas. This loss of concentration was seized by the fighting wandering ninja. The defeat of his men made his eyes bloodshot, and he slashed at Ryosuke Tanuki with a ferocious face. During the hasty defense, Tanuki Ryosuke's body was blown away by the huge force, and bloodshot eyes overflowed from the corners of his mouth. The war situation turned upside down again, making the caravan members feel like they were on a roller coaster. It's really amazing. I didn't expect the members of Master Jawei's team to be so strong. That watermelon had underestimated him before, but he is actually so strong. If they take action, we should be safe. In the caravan, Aburame Jawei looked at Hyuga Satoru, who was using his ninja sword to draw water. His brows could not help but frown slightly. He shook his head and said, "This enlightenment, let him solve it quickly," and he actually started to practice the ninja sword. "It's too slow." Taking a breath, he slowly raised his palm, and the black insects crazily emerged from his sleeves, like a black mist. What sound? The caravan members turned around in confusion, and their scalps suddenly became numb. They saw the overwhelming black bugs making a buzzing sound, and instantly passed over them and rushed towards the wandering ninja who was fighting. Instantly, the screams were endless. Almost all the wandering ninjas were wrapped in black insects, rolling on the ground in pain and wailing miserably. Teacher has taken action. Now I can't row through the water to practice sword skills. Seeing that the enemy in front of him was swallowed by parasites, Hyuga Satoru smashed his mouth helplessly and put away his ninja sword. Tanuki Ryosuke struggled to resist the slashed ninja sword. His body was hit hard and kept retreating, and he spit out a mouthful of blood. At the critical moment, there was only a buzzing sound, and the black parasites instantly enveloped the Jonin, forming a huge black sphere, and screams continued to come from the middle. Secret technique. Insect Jade. Aburame made a slight seal. The black sphere suddenly shrank, and the screams stopped abruptly. The battlefield suddenly became quiet, with only the buzzing sound of flying insects in the air. The caravan members' Adam's apples trembled slightly, and they stared blankly at the wandering ninja who was eaten by insects on the ground with only his skeleton left. Is this the end? Cheers. The ceramic wine glasses filled with wine collided in midair, making a crisp and sweet impact sound. Hyuga Satoru drank all the wine in the glass. His cheeks were a little red, and he pointed to the table full of barbecue. Come on, I'm treating you this time. Everyone can eat as you like." "Then you're welcome, Satoru." Anko picked up a large piece of barbecue with her chopsticks and stuffed it into her mouth with a look of pleasure on her face. Next to him, Aburame Jawei smiled helplessly. He couldn't stand the tough talk from Hyuga Satoru and others, so he had no choice but to come to this party. After delivering the caravan to its destination, Ryosuke's team only took away a small part of the bounty for some unknown reason, leaving the bulk to his team. Hyuga Satoru planned to fulfill his promise when completing the S-class mission and decided to invite the team members to dinner. Dai and Kai declined, so the four of them appeared in the barbecue restaurant again. Looking at the familiar layout of the store, Aburame Jawei suddenly got a headache. When the third shift was first established, he had a stumble in this barbecue restaurant. I don't know if it was an illusion, but Aburame Jawei always felt that the chubby store manager had been peeking at him with a smile, as if he had found someone who had taken advantage of him. Satoru said he was treating guests. It shouldn't be wrong. Aburame Ji shuddered slightly. On that day, Aburame Shiwei recalled the fear of being dominated by Hyuga Gohan, and the humiliation of being unable to pay at the BBQ restaurant. Hyuga Satoru stuffed his mouth full of barbecue. Naturally, he didn't know what Aburame Jawei was thinking. Even if he knew, he would only laugh. Aburame Jawei only took a small part of the bounty from the last S-level mission. The remaining part was enough for him to spend a long time. There was no need to go out for dinner. Moreover, this dinner was not only for the purpose of enhancing the team's relationship, he also has other plans. 8 Gates Dunjia. After getting the method from Mad Dai, Hyuga Satoru couldn't wait to practice. Eating a large amount of food will allow his body to store enough energy to cope with the needs of high-intensity training. After the dinner party, after bidding farewell to Anko and the others, Hyuga Satoru went to a ninja shop and spent half a day custom making what he needed. The cultivation method of 8 Gates Dunjia is not complicated. Rather than a physical skill, it is more of a technique to break through the limits of the human body. The key to completion lies in a strong enough physical quality. Therefore, Hyuga Satoru plans to start special training on his body. After arriving at Yamanaka, where I usually practice, I started to make simple arrangements. First, a metal iron sheet was laid on the ground. It was more like a floor than an iron sheet. It was very thick and cost Hyuga a lot of money, which made him feel a little distressed. After it was fixed, the open space seemed to be paved with a flat metal floor. Later, Hyuga Satoru put on the metal jacket customized according to his body, and his whole figure turned into an armored warrior. It's just that this armor is not that gorgeous, and traces of metal splicing can be seen. When he was ready, he began to use electromagnetic force to construct an opposite-gender magnetic field. A huge suction force suddenly emerged from the metal floor. Hyuga Satoru stumbled and almost fell. The metal armor on his body pressed against the frame and creaked, causing him to involuntarily clench his teeth. It seems the magnetic field is too strong. Hyuga Satoru immediately weakened the magnetism a bit, and the pressure on his body suddenly relaxed. After several adjustments, Hyuga Satoru finally found the most suitable intensity, which can effectively exercise his body without putting too much pressure on him. He roughly estimated that it was equivalent to an increase of 4 times the gravity. However, because the source of pressure is the contact surface between the metal armor and the body, this method is much rougher than directly increasing gravity, and it is also difficult to temper the internal organs. Likewise, because the source of pressure is the attraction between metals, there are many more training options. For example, by changing the direction of magnetic attraction, or suddenly changing to repulsive force, the physical quenching in some extreme environments can be simulated. Because the strong magnetism of the metal floor will attract light and small substances such as fallen leaves, so after exercising for a period of time, a layer of falling leaves has appeared on the metal floor, which indeed affects the appearance. Hyuga Satoru stopped, leaned over and placed his palms on the metal plate. The magnetic poles were reversed, and the fallen leaves were covered with microcharges of the same gender, accompanied by a dull sound. Starting from where his palm touched, the fallen leaves on the metal plate suddenly flew up and quickly spread to the entire metal floor. It seemed like a rain of fallen leaves fell all around. Under the influence of the repulsive force, the metal floor is as smooth as a mirror, and no tiny foreign matter can be seen anymore. The magnetic pole was restored, and Hyuga continued to exercise. During the following period, relying on this self-created bodybuilding method, Hyuga Satoru's physical strength steadily increased until it reached a certain limit. Sure enough, the rational use of electromagnetic force can greatly help enhance physical fitness. After removing the cheap armor from his body, Hyuga Satoru regained his strength, his eyes flickered, and he said in a deep voice, "It's almost done, you can try to open the 8 gates armor." Taking a deep breath, following Professor Matthias' chakra flow method, he began to gradually break through the limitations of the physical body, starting with the gate of opening located in the brain. The first gate, Gate of Opening, open. With a low shout, Hyuga Satoru was surrounded by a faint wave of air. Hey, is it an illusion? Hyuga Satoru frowned. The moment the gate of opening opened, he vaguely noticed that the purple star in his mind seemed to be shaking. Normally, star swirl will change only when the level of electromagnetic force increases. Hyuga Satoru doesn't know if this is an illusion. No matter what, this state is far from the limit. Taking a breath, Hyuga continued to focus on the flow of chakra in his body. The second gate, Gate of Healing, open. Is this the state of Gate of Healing? The physical fatigue is greatly reduced, and there seems to be a steady stream of power, but this is not the limit. The third gate, Gate of Life, open. There was a faint green wave lingering around his body, and a tic-tac-toe vein appeared on his forehead. Hyuga Satoru clenched his fist tentatively and couldn't help but sigh in admiration. It's only the third gate, but I still feel that my physical strength has increased significantly. I am worthy of being able to fight 6 Paths 8 Gates dungeon with a mortal body. Immediately, he couldn't help but weirdly thought that when 8 Gates was turned on, veins would bulge on his face. After he turned on Byakugan, there would also be bulging veins around his eye sockets. How beautiful would the picture be if he used Byakugan with 8 Gates turned on? It won't scare the little friends, right? Shaking his head, Hyuga Satoru dispersed his distracting thoughts. He felt that his current state was not the limit. I heard from Senior Dai that the 8 Gates Dungeon is a dangerous area after opening 4 doors. It is the real 8 Gates Dungeon. I don't know what will happen after it is opened. After this period of physical training, Hyuga Satoru realized that Sanmin was not his limit. Taking a deep breath, he mobilized the remaining chakra and started to attack the Gate of Pain located in the lungs. The fourth gate of 8 Gates Dungeon, Gate of Pain, open. The moment the fourth door opened, Hyuga's pupils suddenly shrank, and the life magnetic field burned violently like dry wood sprinkled with oil. At the same time, his body changed. The hair stood on end, Thunder arcs swam between the hair strands, the body floated uncontrollably into the air, and the clothes whirred under the huge air waves. What is this? This is definitely not 8 Gates Dungia. Hyuga Satoru was shocked. Mid-air, Hyuga Satoru took in big gulps of air to relieve the shock in his mind and the consumption of his body that was constantly being squeezed. The current state of him was completely different from the state in his memory when 8 Gates Dungia was turned on. The 8 Gates Dungia can never fly. Even if the Gate of Death is turned on, it has no ability to fly and can only stay in the air at an extraordinary speed. But now he is really flying in the air, and the explosive power in his body is completely different from the 8 Gates Dungia. 8 Gates' power is extreme speed and attack, and his current state is more like a tyrannical look down on the world, full of violence that kills and plunders all living things. In any case, I can tell that this state will never last forever. Let's test my ability now. Hyuga Satoru took a deep breath, stretched out his right palm towards the thick metal plate under his feet, and with a slight movement of his mind, a large hole was opened in the metal floor that he had spent a lot of energy to build. A large number of thick metal plates squeezed and rubbed against each other, making a tooth-aching screeching sound. Hyuga Satoru suddenly grasped his hand, and the twisted metal suddenly shrank and twisted into a twisted ball. What a terrifying power! Hyuga Satoru still had a trace of shock in his eyes. This level of absolute control over metal was something he was never able to achieve before. Is it possible that in the current state, my ability to improve is not physical? It is the authority over electromagnetic force. Hyuga Satoru feels that he has grasped something. Now, his life magnetic field is as strong as the sun, burning like a raging fire. After finding the direction, Hyuga took a breath and slowly raised his hands in midair. The ground suddenly trembled slightly, and the fallen leaves and branches on the ground trembled rapidly up and down. The animals in the surrounding woods seemed to have discovered something, and fled away in panic. Rumble. Amid the shaking of the earth, a large amount of metal sprung up from the ground like bamboo shoots after a rain, crisscrossing each other, piercing through the thick trees, and the dust flew. When it stopped, a ferocious metal jungle suddenly appeared. In the air, Hyuga Satoru was breathing heavily, sweat dripping from his forehead, looking at his masterpiece. A smile couldn't help but appear on his pale face. Sure enough, now my control over electromagnetic force has greatly increased. He used electromagnetic force to control the gathering of metal particles under the Earth's surface, and then controlled them to rise up and grow intertwined to form a metal jungle. This was something he could not do before. The magnet style of the third-generation case cage can achieve a similar technique with the help of a large amount of sand iron, but Hyuga Satoru has to forcefully pull out all the metals under the surface of the Earth with a radius of nearly a kilometer. In terms of difficulty, it is not on the same level. He clenched his palms into fists, his body turned into a thunder, and his whole body suddenly hit the ground. Several large trees as thick as one arm were smashed by the violent force, and sawdust flew. Not only that, but even the surrounding metal jungle was broken hard. Twisting his waist and abdomen, he swept down with a roundhouse kick. The big tree that needed to be hugged by 3 people exploded into powder at the point of contact, and the huge tree trunk fell from the woods with a roar. Each physical attack may seem simple and unpretentious, but it contains great power and is full of violent aesthetics. It is completely different from the 8 Gates Dungia Primary Lotus and Ura Lotus. This is a terrifying ability blessed by electromagnetic force. Hyuga Satoru's body was enveloped by the beating arc of lightning. At this moment, every inch of his skin and every cell was filled with explosive power. Stepping out, the metal jungle surrounding him seemed to be alive. It separated from where he was strolling, revealing a passage for his body to pass through. Finally, I know how Magneto really feels. Hyuga smiled and was very satisfied with his current state. The sudden increase in electromagnetic power gave him a vague taste of Magneto. Walking to the place where the metal floor was laid before, he raised his palm and saw that the twisted metal was crushed into a plate shape and laid in its original position. The metal jungle behind also slowly submerged into the ground as if it had been summoned by something, leaving behind a messy forest. After the last metal jungle submerged into the ground, the lightning arcs around Hyuga Satoru disappeared, and his standing hair returned to normal. After doing all this, Hyuga Satoru's face turned pale and he was breathing heavily. It's almost time to come over. He looked into the distance. About 10 seconds later, several Anbu wearing animal masks appeared nearby. Looking at the messy forest around them, there was a look of shock in the eyes outside the masks. What happened? The surrounding area is so damaged. Is it an enemy attack? A smile appeared on Hyuga's pale face, and he said, "Sorry, I was practicing a ninjutsu just now, and there was a bit of noise." It's Hyuga Satoru. Anbu recognized him. Hyuga Satoru is currently considered a celebrity next to Hokage. He has completed an important Anbu mission in the Kingdom of Iron. His instructor, Aburame Shiwei, was also a member of Anbu in the past, so these Anbu are no strangers to Hyuga Satoru. Practice ninjutsu. Make such a big noise. The Anbu are still a little surprised. As far as the traces around them are concerned, it is probably difficult for Jonin to find them. If they were allowed to see the metal jungle before, they don't know how shocked they would be. Hyuga Satoru deliberately coughed a few times, looked extremely weak, smiled bitterly and said, "I developed a powerful ninjutsu, but lost control, and this is what happened." "I see." Anbu nodded slightly. Hyuga Satoru didn't look weak like he was pretending. His chakra seemed to be completely exhausted, and there were no traces of other ninjas around. It seemed that this was indeed the case. "In that case, we won't bother you." With a few whooshes, Anbu disappeared. Sensing that Anbu had left, Hyuga Satoru breathed a sigh of relief and his eyes flickered. It is true that training has lost control, but the reason is not the development of ninjutsu. To be precise, it is the development of a model. Tyrant mode. This is the name Hyuga Satoru gave to his current state. I didn't expect that after the 8 gates Dunjia opens to the 4th gate, the life magnetic field will suddenly increase dramatically, thus greatly feeding back the electromagnetic power. Hyuga Satoru took a breath, the shock still lingering in his heart. The ability he used just now is at least equivalent to the electromagnetic force level 55-4. In that state, he would dare to fight even if he encounters an enemy of Aburame Jiwei's level. Forcibly crossing the level of electromagnetic force and using abilities far beyond the current level, this is the tyrant mode. It was also the substantial increase in electromagnetic power that greatly increased his electromagnetic perception range. Without turning on his Byakugan, he discovered that Anbu was approaching. But thinking about it carefully, this change is very reasonable. Before practicing 8 gates Dunjia, he discovered that the strong biomagnetic field would feed back the electromagnetic authority. Every time the 8 gates is opened, the biomagnetic field will increase sharply. The 4th gate is a watershed, and it is not difficult to understand that the purple star in the mind will resonate. The power is much greater than the regular 8 gates, but the aftereffects seem to be great. Hyuga Satoru smiled helplessly. In just a few minutes, not a drop of his chakra was left. He felt a tearing and tingling sensation when he moved his muscles lightly. But it has become my most powerful trump card. When facing an enemy whose strength far exceeds my own, I have a chance to make a comeback. After sleeping in a daze all night, Hyuga Satoru still felt sore all over his body until he got up from bed in the morning. I didn't expect the sequelae of Tyrant mode to be so stubborn. Chakra has mostly recovered, but the muscle damage still requires a period of rest. Grinning slightly, Hyuga Satoru held the head of the bed with one hand and kept rubbing his side with the other. If anyone saw his current appearance, they would definitely wonder if he experienced a fierce battle last night, which caused the body is severely deficient. After a simple breakfast, Hyuga Satoru felt that his body had recovered a little. He sighed and said, "Let's postpone the practice progress for a few days. After the body recovers in a few days, it will not be too late to continue." There were still a few days before the next mission agreed by Aburame Shiwei, and Hyuga Satoru came to the street with nothing to do. The village was still prosperous at this moment, and children could be seen playing and chasing each other on the streets. Hyuga looked at the sky outside the village with melancholy. How long can such peaceful days be maintained? The third war will probably not be long. If it were before, Hyuga Satoru would never let himself relax at all. The war was like a sword of Damocles hanging over his head, always oppressing him. However, the tyrant mode he accidentally developed yesterday gave him some confidence in facing the unknown future. It's been a long time since I had Ichiraku ramen. Taking a break while busy is also a good pleasure, Hyuga Satoru smiled. At this moment, he saw Hongdu panting and running towards him not far away. It's bad, Satoru. Rin and Kakashi got into a fight. The smile on Hyuga Satoru's face froze instantly. That white-haired kid is White Fang's son, right? That should be it. I heard that he is the best genius of the new generation in the village. That Uchiha kid has lasted for so long. It seems that he is not a good person. HMPH, Uchiha kid and White Fang's son, it's really exciting. In front of the mission management office, ninjas had already formed a circle around me, discussing with each other. The short sword crossed the white half-arc, constantly colliding with the kunai at a speed that was imperceptible to the naked eye, and the sound of sparks and metal flying around. The scarlet Sharingan turned quickly, and after Uchiha Rin blocked a slash, the solemn expression on his face deepened. Kakashi's sword skills are quite powerful, and every slash goes straight to her weak point. If it weren't for Sharingan's assistance, she might have been defeated long ago. This guy's strength has improved so quickly. Uchiha Rin couldn't help but grit her teeth slightly. She had been competing with Kakashi during the ninja school. Unexpectedly, after graduation, the gap actually widened. Why did Kakashi become like this? Even if Rin mentioned his father, he wouldn't be so harsh. Kai, who was in the crowd, had a worried look on his face. They were both his classmates, and he didn't know what to do when they suddenly started fighting. I seem to have remembered your name. It's Uchiha Rin, right? You shouldn't mention that man's name. He's just a loser who can't even complete the task. TCH. Kakashi's remarks made Uchiha Rin very unhappy. In terms of strength, I respect Mr. White Fang very much, but I didn't expect that his son would only use his words. Asshole, I told you not to mention that man's name. Unexpectedly, Kakashi immediately became angry at Uchiha Rin's words, jumped back to distance himself, and formed seals at an extremely fast speed. A shrill sound like the screams of thousands of birds sounded, one hand held his wrist, and the other hand pulsed with lightning. Lightning style ninjutsu, how does it compare to my fire style? Uchiha Rin's eyes narrowed slightly, and he formed seals quickly as well. Phoenix Claw Jutsu. B-level fire style ninjutsu is the strongest fire style ninjutsu she can currently use. It's that jutsu. Is Kakashi crazy? It's too random. This technique is not mature yet. Does he want to kill the other party? There were ninjas around who recognized Kakashi's moves and couldn't help but feel their hearts tightening. The piercing thunder sounded, and Kakashi's body turned into a straight line, rushing towards Uchiha Rin at extremely fast speed. The seal in Uchiha Rin's hand has reached the last one. There is no fear on his face, only a strong fighting spirit. Chakra surges into his throat and turns into a hot breath. Suddenly, snapped. A dull sound of flesh colliding sounded, and the palm wrapped in lightning stopped 1 meter in front of Uchiha Rin. The latter's lips were slightly opened, and the fiery fire style was just 1 second away from spitting out. What a close call, we caught up. Hyuga Satoru breathed a sigh of relief, grinning slightly because of the tingling pain caused by the strenuous exercise that had not yet recovered from the muscles. At this moment, his right hand was firmly grasping Kakashi's wrist, and his other shoulder was pressed against his chest, blocking his attack. Satoru, why are you here? Uchiha Rin looked surprised. Immediately, as if he remembered something, he showed a hint of anger. Hey, do you know how dangerous it was just now? My fire style was almost released within a second. Hyuga Satoru endured the pain in his muscles, gritted his teeth slightly and said to Uchiha Rin, I will be in trouble if I don't come. He glanced at Kakashi's right palm without leaving any trace, with a trace of shock remaining. Chidori, A-level lightning style. Didn't you expect that Kakashi has developed this technique? But he can't fully master it yet. If he hadn't blocked this move, Uchiha Rin would have been in real danger. At the same time, Kakashi also turned his attention to Hyuga Satoru, who suddenly appeared. You discovered my weakness, Chidori, and cleverly blocked my attack with your body. Byakugan, no wonder you can do this. After seeing Hyuga Satoru's eyes, Kakashi showed a thoughtful expression. What happened? Why did you suddenly start a fight? Uchiha glanced at Kakashi. I was just at the mission management office to see if there were any suitable missions. I happened to meet this guy and planned to say hello. I accidentally mentioned his father, and they started fighting. Until now, she still hasn't realized how she got into a fight with Kakashi. Is that so? Hyuga Satoru nodded thoughtfully. He thought that with Uchiha Rin's temperament, she would be the first to provoke him, but unexpectedly, it was Kakashi who made the first move. I've already said, don't mention that man in front of me, he's just a loser who can't even complete the task. Kakashi's voice was cold and devoid of any emotion. Look, Uchiha Rin shrugged helplessly. Hyuga couldn't help but sigh. It seemed that Kakashi at this stage had not yet recovered from the pain of that incident. Also, in the village, I heard from time to time that he had disagreements with his teammates, and even got into fights. It wasn't until he got together with Obito later that he slowly came out of it. Kakashi suddenly looked at Hyuga Satoru with coldness. You are the first double-blood successor in Hyuga history, right? We haven't competed yet. In an instant, the atmosphere that had relaxed around him became tense again, and everyone's eyes were focused on Hyuga Satoru. Satoru. Anko clenched her hands worriedly. Kakashi, this fool, does he still have a companion in his eyes? Kai yelled. If he hadn't known that he couldn't beat Kakashi, he might have wanted to beat him up. Hyuga Satoru had a look of helplessness on his face. It seemed that he was riding a tiger and was unable to stop. The pain in his body had not subsided. His current strength was very weak. But if he didn't agree, I'm afraid Kakashi wouldn't give up so easily. In addition, he also noticed a vague prying eyes, which had been firmly locked here. In this case, Hyuga Satoru turned around and faced Kakashi with a serious look on his face. If you insist on asking, let's get started. Look, Hyuga's ninjas and Kakashi are about to fight. Is this another good show? First Uchiha, then Hyuga, Kakashi, is this guy planning to challenge all the wealthy families today? The battle between Kakashi and Uchiha Rin attracted many ninjas, and more ninjas were gathering in the mission management office, discussing excitedly with each other. Different from other ninjas' mentality of watching a show, the surrounding Hyuga ninjas couldn't help but feel worried at this moment. Hyuga Satoru, can you beat Kakashi? After all, he is the first double bloodstained ninja in the family, so there should be no problem. The voice did not have much confidence and was inaudible amid the noisy discussion. Kakashi's reputation is too high. 5-year-old Genin, 6-year-old Chunin, the youngest Chunin in the history of Konoha, the son of White Fang, any title can beat Hyuga Satoru. The only thing Hyuga Satoru can compare to is the double blood stain. If he loses to Kakashi head-on, it will definitely bring disgrace to the Hyuga clan. Is that guy Satoru a match for Kakashi? Kai was also a little worried. Kakashi was the opponent he had been chasing when he was a student, but the changes in the past 2 years were so great that he could hardly recognize him. Yes, Hongdu said confidently. Why are you so sure? Kai Wong looked at him. Although Kakashi is not a human being, his strength is definitely the first echelon of the new generation. If you can, you can. Anyway, Satoru will never lose, even if the opponent is Kakashi. Anko shouted loudly, causing many people to look at her sideways. In the current state, the strength that the body can exert is limited, so try to avoid physical combat. Hyuga Satoru briefly analyzed his situation and determined the rough tactics. Kakashi holds the White Fang short sword in his hand. Under the infusion of chakra, the blade emits a faint white light. I advise you not to use that knife. Hyuga raised his eyebrows slightly. Why? Kakashi frowned in displeasure. You'll find out later. The soles of his feet kicked the ground violently, and Kakashi's body was like an arrow from the string, rushing towards Kakashi at an extremely fast speed. The White Fang short sword in his hand turned into a white light and slashed towards Hyuga Satoru. Hyuga Satoru didn't dodge or even move. The short sword seemed to be gently moved by an invisible hand, its trajectory changed incredibly, and it was chopped off from around his body. Kakashi frowned and, unwilling to give up, slashed with his sword again. Hyuga Satoru shook his head, turned slightly sideways, and slashed the air again with his ninja sword. Draw out the sword and cut into the air. Cut the air, draw the sword, cut the air again. Kakashi seemed to have turned into a master of human body drawing, outputting frantically on the air around Hyuga Satoru's body. The scene was quite funny at one point. Can I understand that you want to cut away the air around me and suffocate me to death? Hyuga Satoru shrugged, with a look of helplessness on his face. Uchiha burst out laughing. This Satoru was too bad, and his words were too damaging. Kakashi took a breath, the solemnity in his eyes getting deeper and deeper. Magnet style. I didn't expect it would have such a great impact on my sword skills. He knew that Hyuga Satoru's magnet style could interfere with shurikens, but it was much more difficult to interfere with a manned ninja sword than a shuriken, and Hitaki's sword skills were famous for their sharpness. But now it seems that he underestimated Hyuga Satoru's magnet style. Silently putting away the white Fang short sword, Kakashi clenched his fist and rushed towards Hyuga Satoru. Hyuga Satoru raised his arm to block Kakashi's attack, but failed. Kakashi switched his attack and twisted around to kick a roundhouse kick. Hyuga Satoru turned sideways and narrowly avoided it. There was a faint tingling sensation in his arm, which made him grin slightly. His body had not fully recovered yet, and physical combat would involve pain. The electromagnetic perception is used to the extreme, and Kakashi's attack can be avoided in advance before it arrives. Only attacks that are difficult to avoid will be forced to defend. But this forced action was a state of affairs in the eyes of the surrounding ninjas. Too strong, Kakashi's attacks can't touch him at all. The ninja from the Hyuga family, who dodged calmly without even a single counterattack, was he provoking Kakashi? The discussion went from being unfavorable about Hyuga Satoru to being amazed by him. Kakashi's continuous physical attacks put a lot of pressure on Hyuga Satoru. He caught the opponent's attack, stepped sideways slightly, turned his fist into a palm, and stamped it on Kakashi's chest. Bang! Along with the dull roar of flesh, a thunder arc erupted from the location under the palm print. Kakashi's body flew out under the action of the pulse and hit the ground heavily, splashing a burst of dust. That's gentle fist. The eyelids of the Hyuga members who were watching jumped. The stance seems to be that of gentle fist, but the attack is completely different. I heard from Iroha that it seems to be called the magnetic storm fist. The principle, seems to be quite complicated. This guy Hyuga Satoru has never learned the family's special skills. Kakashi got up from the ground with difficulty. Thunder arcs were beating constantly in his chest, causing his body to twitch. You can't fight hard. He silently had a countermeasure in his mind. He reached for the ninja bag on his waist, took out 2 small balls and slammed them down. The thick smoke immediately engulfed his body and the fighting Hyuga Satoru. In the thick fog, Hyuga Satoru shook his head. It's useless. Hokage room. The picture in the crystal ball is Hyuga Satoru knocking Kakashi away with his magnetic storm palm. Is it a combination of magnet style and gentle fist? This kid, Hyuga Satoru, is quite skillful in using the combination of dual bloodstain abilities. Sarutobi Hiruzen nodded slightly in admiration. The Mission Management Office is a very important position in Konoha Village. As early as the beginning of the battle between Uchiha Rin and Kakashi, Anbu reported the news to him. Then the arrival of Hyuga Satoru made his interest immediately more intense. The image of the crystal ball was still changing. It was Kakashi who threw 2 small balls, and thick smoke enveloped the 2 of them. Who will win this new generation's strongest showdown? Sarutobi Hiruzen's eyes were bright. In the thick fog, Hyuga Satoru watched the surroundings warily. Suddenly, there was a shock behind him, and Hyuga Satoru immediately turned around and stamped his palm on the attacking figure. Bang! The figure turned into white mist. Shadow clone. It seems I can't stand it anymore. The moment he defeated the shadow clone, the ground behind him suddenly cracked, and a figure jumped out. His right palm was wrapped in lightning, making a sharp sound. Chidori. It's impossible to miss at such a close distance. Kakashi felt happy. Just when he was about to hit, Hyuga Satoru seemed to have expected it. He twisted his body incredibly and just dodged Chidori's attack sideways. The palm of his hand suddenly grasped Kakashi's wrist and pushed forward slightly. Kakashi fell to the ground like a dog eating shit, and Chidori made a big hole in the ground. At this moment, the smoke dissipated, and the battle situation was clearly visible to everyone. What did you send? Is it over yet? Kakashi fell to the ground in a panic, with a hint of shock at his easy defeat on his face, and his right hand was inserted deeply into the ground. Behind him, Hyuga stood indifferently. Do you know what I meant when I asked you not to use that knife? Because it's White Fang's knife and you are not qualified to use it. Chapter 31. That's White Fang's knife, you're not qualified to use it. Hyuga Satoru's words were so harsh in Kakashi's ears, like a bomb, that he couldn't help but blush and roar. What do you know? What do you, an outsider, know? He is just a coward. So what if he gave up the mission? So what if he was insulted by his companions? Why did he commit suicide? Why did he commit suicide? Perhaps because he has endured too much in the past 2 years, or perhaps because of the humiliation of being defeated by Hyuga Satoru in public. Kakashi actually fell to the ground and cried in front of everyone. You don't have to die, so what if you were insulted by the villagers? Doesn't he still have me? Why did he choose to commit suicide? Why? At some point, the crowd suddenly became quiet, and Kakashi's cry seemed so harsh in this environment. So this is what you care about? Hyuga Satoru sighed. It seems that his father's suicide made Kakashi extremely sad. In the past 2 years, he has been brainwashing himself and numbing his pain with the idea that a man who can't even complete the task is just a coward. Until now, being defeated by Hyuga Satoru in public, the inner defense was completely broken. The surrounding ninjas were silent and lowered their heads slightly. Many of them were involved in seriously injuring Hitaki Tsukumo. Rumors were burning under the nourishment of malice. When they calmed down, they found that the person was no longer there. So, it was tacitly understood and no longer mentioned. Kakashi. Kai couldn't help but clenched his fists. He had never seen Kakashi like this, weak, sad, and powerless. Hyuga Satoru showed a complicated expression and said, I have not seen Lord Whitefang with my own eyes, but I have heard about his deeds. I think his choice at the last moment was to implement his own will. Carry out his will. On the ground, Kakashi's eyes lit up and he raised his head to look at Hyuga Satoru. To express one's will through death, I think this is what he thought. He did not die out of cowardice or fear, but used his own death to silently interpret his will. Maybe he was still smiling at the last moment when he stabbed himself with the ninja sword. Is this so? Kakashi stopped crying and fell into deep thought. Interpretation of his own will. The figure of the man who always smiled appeared in his mind. Father, is this what you had in mind at the last moment? He has always thought that his father was too fragile and chose to commit suicide. Hyuga Satoru's remarks slightly changed his view. Although this change is small, it is like a seed planted in his heart. Hokage room. Hyuga Satoru's voice passed through the crystal ball on the table, word by word, and reached the ears of the silent Sarutobi Hiruzen. For a long time, he looked out the window melancholy, and the gentle white-haired man appeared in his mind. Tsukumo. Hyuga Satoru's words were like tentacles touching his heart. Don't blame me, you can't be Hokage. He sighed quietly. In front of the mission management office, Hyuga Satoru shook his head secretly. In fact, as a time traveler, he knew that the truth of this matter was far more cruel, involving an internal struggle among Konoha's top leaders and the candidates for the 4th Hokage. And he could only make Hitaki Tsukumo's back as majestic as possible. After all, his words were not just for Kakashi to hear. As early as when he first arrived here, he noticed a vague prying gaze here. After a little thought, he knew that Sarutobi Hiruzen must be watching here. I wonder what the Hokage-sama who indirectly forced Whitefang to death would think after hearing his remarks. Bringing his thoughts back, Hyuga Satoru turned his attention to Kakashi again and spoke slightly coldly. I know that today's defeat must be difficult for you to accept. At any time, as long as you feel that you can defeat me, you can come and challenge me at any time. I am waiting for you. After saying that, he left the confused Kakashi and the silent crowd around him, turned around and left. Hey, Satoru, wait for me. Enko suddenly reacted and chased Hyuga Satoru with a shout. Uchiha looked at Hyuga's leaving figure and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows slightly. Satoru, this guy is pretty cool. Kakashi looked at Hyuga Satoru's leaving figure, his previous words were still replaying in his mind, and he didn't know what he was thinking. When they reached a deserted place, Hyuga Satoru held onto the wall and suddenly grinned and screamed. Mad, it hurts me so much. It felt like thousands of needles had penetrated my body, and it was extremely painful to move even slightly. It's fun to show off for a while, but it's a crematorium afterwards. His body has not yet fully recovered. In order not to expose more of his abilities, he only used magnetic punches when fighting Kakashi, which put an even greater burden on his body. At this moment, Hongdu ran over and said worriedly, Satoru, are you okay? Hyuga Satoru turned around, grabbed her wrist, pulled her to his side, and whispered through gritted teeth. Give me that quickly. The unique smell of men's bodies penetrated Anko's nose, causing her face to turn red from the base of her ears, like a ripe red apple. Satoru, do you want to be here? How bad is it to be seen? Where else would you be if you weren't here? Do you still want to change places? Anko's face turned redder and she buried her face in her hair shyly. Rin will be angry if she finds out, right? What does it have to do with her? Forget it, I won't bother you anymore, just give me a healing spell. Hokage room. After digesting his emotions, Sarutobi Hiruzen recalled the scene of Hyuga Satoru's clean victory over Kakashi and couldn't help but laugh. It seems that the strongest member of the new generation is undoubtedly Hyuga Satoru. And he also knew very well that Hyuga Satoru also had a terrifying bow and arrow move called ninjutsu. If he used it, Kakashi would probably be defeated faster. It's a pity that he is a branch house. He couldn't help but sigh. If it weren't for the branch house, he would really train Hyuga Satoru to enter the Hokage lineage. He has a perfect talent. His words to Kakashi also explained the will of fire. With such a good seedling, he has plans to accept a disciple. It's just that as a branch house, any decision made by Hyuga Satoru needs to be more cautious. Immediately, he thought of Kakashi again and couldn't help but sigh slightly. Kakashi can't delay this kid any longer, let Minato teach him. We need to find a few teammates for him, and we can only choose among familiar people at the same time. Well, Uchiha Obito's character is very suitable and may be able to neutralize Kakashi's gloominess. The remaining one, Nohara Lin, as a medical ninja with a civilian background, is just the perfect fit. After thinking for a while, Sarutobi Hiruzen nodded with satisfaction. Then tell Minato to come here now. The next day, an explosive news spread throughout Konoha, like a stone thrown into a lake, causing waves. Hey, have you heard? Hitaki Kakashi, the son of White Fang, was beaten. It's fake, right? The super genius Hitaki Kakashi actually gets beaten up. Really, many people saw it, Kakashi even cried at the end. Hey, did you hear that? Kakashi cried after being beaten. Yes, I heard that he was still rolling on the ground at the end. What, didn't you tell me that Kakashi lay down on his own before he hit him? And then he cried and begged Hyuga Satoru not to hit him. In the early morning, Hyuga Satoru just went out. Hearing the rumors all over the street, his face suddenly turned green. Why did the rumor spread like this? What does it mean that Kakashi cried after being beaten by me? It was obviously her own crying, so what does it have to do with me? And kneeling down to beg for mercy, pissing her ass off, this is all nonsense. The key is that most of the people rumored are actually members of Hyuga. Walking on the streets of the tribe, you can see many tribesmen in groups, excitedly discussing things like, the first genius of the new generation, beating Kakashi to tears, even Uchiha surrendered, and so on. Hyuga Satoru lowered his head and tiptoed, fearing that others would notice him. When he wasn't paying attention, he heard a sudden coaxing sound from behind. Look, it's the genius who beat Kakashi to tears. In an instant, the eyes of all the tribesmen were focused on him. I didn't. Stop talking nonsense. Hyuga's face darkened, and he immediately sped away, leaving his clansmen with question marks. Different from the hustle and bustle of the branch house outside, there was silence in the clan hall, the atmosphere was surprisingly suppressed, and most of the clan elders looked unhappy. Hyuga's eyes swept over the faces of the elders around him, and he couldn't help but feel a headache. The reason why Hyuga can be passed down in the ninja world for more than 1,000 years and become the oldest family depends on rules and systems. But now, there is a clan member who has repeatedly broken the family system. Hyuga Satoru, the first double-blood successor in the history of Hyuga, seems to have never been at peace since his appearance. HMPH. Have these branch houses even forgotten their rules? One of the clan elders' face was ashen and he patted the table angrily. From yesterday to now, he has seen a large number of branch houses gathered together, regardless of etiquette, making excited noises, and many such situations can be seen even outside the family. The family's face has been completely lost by these branch houses. Another clan elder shook his head. Next to Hyuga Suigetsu, Hyuga Hiyashi sighed secretly. He knew that branch house had been depressed for too long. After Hyuga Satoru defeated Kakashi, that depression turned into excitement and excitement. However, Hyuga is not Uchiha. In Hyuga, you have to follow the rules. Alright, Hyuga sighed and felt a headache. Although it is said that the cause of the incident was because of Hyuga Satoru, it would be unreasonable to really punish him for this. After all, he defeated Kakashi, which can be regarded as fighting for the family's face. But if we really ignore it, I'm afraid those branch houses will soon go to heaven. In addition, Hokage's attitude towards Hyuga Satoru is quite intriguing, and we have to take this influence into consideration. The combination of various factors really makes him a little undecided. At this moment, Hyuga Hiyashi next to him suddenly said, "Chief, please leave this matter to me." "Oh, what are your plans?" Hyuga Suigetsu couldn't help but become interested. Hyuga Hiyashi was almost his designated successor. Hyuga Hiyashi smiled. The reason why this matter is complicated is that Hyuga Satoru is just an ordinary branch house, neither a reward nor a punishment. In this case, we will give him another layer of identity. Then, Hyuga Hiyashi narrated his thoughts. Hyuga Suigetsu's eyes gradually brightened. "Okay, I'll leave it to you to handle it." Hyuga Satoru, who had just slipped back from the street, was still heart-beating very fast, and he could hear discussions about himself almost along the way. The point is, few of these discussions are reliable. Even some aunts in the family were eyeing him and trying to introduce their granddaughter to him. Hyuga was so scared that he ran away and is still sweating. "It's too scary. It's better not to go out these days." Hyuga Satoru patted his chest in shock. Just as he was about to take a rest, he heard a knock on the door outside. Hyuga Satoru suddenly became alert, tiptoed behind the door, and carefully aimed his eyes at the gap between the door frames. Signal, signal. The man outside the door was stunned. Why did he need a password when he came to visit? What password? Just then, the door opened, letting him breathe a sigh of relief. The person who came was no stranger to Hyuga Satoru. The two most famous brothers in the family almost looked exactly the same, and there was not much difference in their clothes. The only difference was that one of them wore a forehead protector all year round. "Hazashi-sama, why are you here?" Hyuga Satoru carefully observed the surroundings to make sure that no other Hyuga members were following. "Satoru, can you go in and talk?" There were 2 cups of tea placed on the wooden table, steaming faintly. Judging from the appearance of the tea leaves, they were not of the precious type. "Hazashi-sama, I don't have the habit of drinking tea, so I can only entertain you with this defective product." "It doesn't matter." Hyuga Hazashi smiled, picked up the tea and took a sip. Hyuga has a culture of tea tasting. If someone offers tea, it is etiquette to take a sip. After finishing the courtesy, Hyuga Hazashi looked at Hyuga Satoru, whose face was still a little immature, with a complicated look on his face. "I guessed before that you would be a variable in the family, but I didn't expect that this variable would grow so quickly. A genius beyond Kakashi, the first person of the new generation." Just thinking of these names silently in his heart will make Hyuga Hazashi feel hot inside. There is no doubt that Hyuga Satoru is the best genius of Hyuga since the founding of Konoha. "I think a genius like you would never be willing to be shackled." Hyuga Hazashi looked at Hyuga Satoru complicatedly. Hyuga realized that he was speechless. The implications of these words were too great. If the Zong family heard it, he would probably be in trouble for a while. Seeing that Hyuga Satoru didn't speak, Hazashi sighed, took out a scroll from his arms and put it on the table. "What's this?" "You'll know when you open it and take a look." Hyuga Satoru opened the scroll and found a trace of chakra, and his face suddenly became surprised. The items stored in the scroll were not lacking in abundance. They were definitely the most valuable items he had ever seen. In one corner, there was a huge amount of cash. Hyuga Satoru roughly estimated that it was at least 5 million taels. On the other side, there are a large number of secret techniques related to cultivation, and there are even some secrets that are not passed down by the family. It's okay to have cash, but it involves family secrets. If the clan knows about it, Hyuga Hazashi will definitely be severely punished. "Why?" Hyuga asked in a deep voice. Hyuga Hazashi smiled helplessly. "Just treat it as an investment." Immediately, he stood up and walked towards the door. "I really hope that this change of yours can blow a gust of wind and bring the decayed ancient tree of Hyuga back to life." Hyuga Satoru looked at his back in silence, not so much an investment, but more of a stance. Knowing that you will never be willing to be imprisoned by a caged bird, do you plan to resist with yourself? In the original work, Hyuga Hazashi, who finally recognized his fate and committed suicide, changed his original trajectory under his own influence. Hyuga Satoru carefully put away the scroll. Hyuga Hazashi's support was of great use to his practice. About half an hour later, there was another knock on the door. Hyuga Wu hit the gate of opening, and when he saw that familiar face, he almost blurted out the word subconsciously. Hazashi-sama, why are you? His voice got stuck in his throat. The other person's forehead was extremely smooth. It's Hiyashi-sama, what's the matter? Hyuga Satoru said calmly. It was the same wooden table with 2 cups of tea placed on it. When Hyuga Hiyashi glanced at the tea in front of him, he frowned slightly and did not choose to drink tea, but spoke directly. I am here to take on a disciple. Satoru, how about becoming my disciple? He showed a smile and looked at Hyuga Satoru in front of him. Accepting a disciple was naturally the result of his careful consideration. Everyone knew that he was the next clan leader. In terms of strength, he was already a Jonin just over 20 years old. It was more than enough to teach Hyuga to realize this genin. More importantly, once Hyuga Satoru takes the title of disciple of the next clan leader, all problems will be solved. The branch house will be more obedient to the Hyuga sect because of its status as a disciple of the sect. On the Hokage side, since he has already accepted a disciple, I'm afraid it won't be easy to interfere. I reject. The smile on Hyuga Hiyashi's face froze instantly, as if he was still doubting whether he heard correctly. Are you worried about Aburame Jiwei? Don't worry, he is just your instructor, and there is no conflict with being my disciple. Once you become my disciple, the family will give you a monthly subsidy of 100,000 taels. In addition, some of the Zong family's secret techniques will also be open to you. Hyuga Satoru gave him a helpless look. I think you misunderstood. Hiyashi-sama, I don't want to be your disciple, it has nothing to do with Teacher Jiwei, and it has nothing to do with anything else. Once I become Master Hiyashi's disciple, I'm afraid I won't be able to control many things myself. I don't want to be subject to so many restrictions. This answer stunned Hyuga Hiyashi, and he didn't know how to speak with the prepared words in his throat. Ridiculous. Do you know how many people dream of becoming my disciple? A trace of anger welled up in Hyuga Hiyashi's heart. Years of family upbringing made him instinctively maintain his so-called demeanor. He took a deep breath and calmed down his heart. Well, since you have already decided, I will not force you. Although you have not become my disciple, I will still give you a monthly subsidy of 100,000 taels. This is a reward from the family. After that, he got up and left without stopping at all. Hyuga Satoru looked at his back with deep eyes. Today, the 2 brothers Hazashi and Hiyashi came to him, but their purposes were completely different. He rejected Hiyashi's plan to accept a disciple, which in a sense was a statement. The future may not be too peaceful. He sighed in his heart. In the forest, several figures were like ghosts, walking quickly on the branches, sweeping the surrounding trees behind them. Aburame Jiwei's deep voice sounded and reached the ears of the 3 people behind him. Recently, many caravans have been robbed in the southern part of the Fire Country. Our mission is to eliminate those bandits. Don't underestimate them. According to intelligence, there are many Chunin among them. That's the second thing. The important point is that the bandits are quite cunning. There are 4 locations marked in the intelligence, all of which may be their strongholds. We may separate our operations at that time. No. Hyuga Satoru spoke helplessly. Judging from the nature of the mission, this is probably another Anbu mission. Did Hokage regard them as Anbu substitutes? But as far as the mission is concerned, it is indeed quite suitable for them. Bandits are good at hiding, and both himself and Aburame Jiwei have good investigative abilities. In terms of rewards, it is much better than ordinary missions. As long as the bandits in that area are cleared, an A-level mission is completed, and the reward is quite generous. So delicious. Hyuga Satoru couldn't help but smacked his mouth. After 2 days of traveling, several people arrived at the place mentioned in the information. Hyuga Satoru clearly felt that the air humidity had increased a lot. He glanced across the forest and could see that behind the gray border was a blue sea. Although they were far apart, Hyuga Satoru had a feeling that he could vaguely hear the sound of the sea. He had lived inland all his life, but this time he was the closest to the sea, which made him slightly melancholy. Finding that Hyuga Satoru was looking at the sea, Aburame Jawei also looked at the sea and said with emotion. Every year, the countries on the other side of the sea send a large amount of goods to the land of fire, including ninja tools from the land of craftsmen and specialties from the land of the sea. That's why caravans on this section of the road are so frequent. After we get rid of those bandits, they will feel more at ease transporting the items in. This is what you expect. Aburame looked at Hyuga Satoru slightly and showed a sly smile. The first genius of the new generation, heir to the will of fire, his dream is enlightenment of world peace. Hyuga Satoru smiled helplessly. Teacher Jawei, please stop teasing me. Sure enough, Aburame Jawei also heard the rumors in the village, and he still remembered the dream he casually mentioned when they first met. Satoru, please stop being modest. At least you won't be able to take off the title of the #1 genius of the new generation. Uchiha Rin showed a look of envy. In other words, when she saw Hyuga Satoru defeated Kakashi so simply, she was quite shocked. After all, she had only fought against Kakashi before and knew how difficult the opponent was. Rin, even you. However, Hongdu was rare and did not participate in this topic. She lowered her head silently, not knowing what she was thinking. Then let's start the mission. Aburame took a slight breath. There are 4 locations indicated by the intelligence. Since the opponent's overall strength is not strong, group operations are more efficient. Aburame Jawei looked at Hyuga Satoru. Then I'll be paired with Uchiha Rin, Satoru, and you'll be paired with Anko, no problem. No problem. Hyuga Satoru nodded. Judging from the strength of the pair of bandits in the intelligence, he alone was more than enough. After the grouping was completed, the 2 teams began to act separately. Hyuga Satoru moved towards the location in the intelligence. It didn't take long before he found the target cave. The location was quite hidden. Under the cover of dense trees, the entrance of the cave could only be vaguely seen. White eyes, open. From Byakugan's perspective, the situation inside the cave can be seen at a glance. The space inside is much larger than it looks from the outside. You can see many ninjas moving around in an orderly manner with a clear division of labor. Anko, there are 9 bandits in total, 3 of them are Chunin, 2 are Genin, and the remaining 4 have less chakra than Genin level. Leave the 3 Chunin and Genin to me. You can take care of the rest, okay. Red beans. Hyuga Satoru, who didn't hear the reply, turned around in confusion. I saw Hongdu lowering his head, looking depressed, not knowing what he was thinking. Red beans. Hyuga Satoru pushed her shoulder. Oh. Anko immediately raised her head. Did you hear what I just said? Oh, I understand. His voice was still so weak, and he looked listless. Forget it. Hyuga Satoru shook his head helplessly. You can rest here first and leave these bandits to me. After he finished speaking, he took out a scroll from his arms. The white mist dispersed, and a slender ninja sword appeared in his hand. Ninja sword. Long fangs. Against such hordes of enemies, this slender blade ninja sword is most effective. Wait for me here, I'll be back soon. After giving the warning, Hyuga Satoru rushed into the cave with his ninja sword in hand. Enemy attack. What the hell, he's actually a kid. You don't want to die. Let me teach you. The words stopped suddenly, his pupils trembled in fear, a blood streak spread from his forehead to his chest, and his body fell backwards weakly. Next to him, Hyuga Satoru pouted his lips impatiently. There's so much nonsense. If we go together, isn't it just a kid? I don't believe that so many people can't deal with him. Kill him. In an instant, a large number of shuriken kunai swept towards Hyuga Satoru. An incredible scene appeared. The moment the shuriken approached, it seemed to be gently moved by a big hand, and it circled around his body in an arc. What's going on? Does this kid know how to do sorcery? Hyuga Satoru suddenly rushed towards the nearest bandit, slashed his long fangs at a tricky angle, and slashed at the man's throat. Kid, go to hell. An unknown bandit suddenly tore open a scroll, and the white mist dispersed. A large number of metal ninja tools burst towards Hyuga Satoru, and the detonating talisman wrapped behind them emitted smoke. A sharp look flashed in Hyuga Satoru's eyes, and he put on a strange posture, with one foot as the center of the circle, and suddenly turned at extremely high speed. Return to heaven and yin. The high-speed rotating blue hemisphere suddenly enveloped his body, and the ninja tools that swept over him first froze in midair for a short time at the moment of contact, and then sputtered away in all directions at extremely fast speeds. In just a short moment, violently flying metal ninja tools engulfed the entire inside of the cave. Boom, boom, boom. The flames of the detonating talisman's explosion lit up one after another in the chaotic cave. The bandit who tore open the scroll never imagined that his angry move would ruin the entire team until his death. Until a certain moment, the explosion subsided, and everywhere you looked, there was a tragedy, and there was not a single living bandit. Hyuga Satoru shrugged helplessly. I originally planned to leave a whole body for you. Keishin Yin is a secret technique he developed based on Keishin. When performing Keishin, he uses electromagnetic force to build a repulsive magnetic field, which will instantly bounce approaching objects away. The Huishin Yang developed at the same time attracts surrounding objects, similar to the Wanxiang Tianyan. After crawling in the ninja world for such a long time, he is no longer as fragile as the insomnia he suffered after the first murder. Ninja has always been a profession that is accompanied by death. After storing the items needed to prove the mission in the scroll, Hyuga Satoru left the cave and came to Anko's position. The other person still looked sluggish. What's wrong with you, Anko? He couldn't help but ask. Satoru, am I a waste? Hongdu raised his head, his brown-gray eyes were dim and without any color. Trash, Hyuga smiled helplessly. To be honest, I don't understand why you would apply this word to yourself. But I really feel that I am useless. You and Rin are both so good, and Teacher Jue is also famous among the Jonin. I am the only one. Anko's voice became lower and lower. Why do you think so? Hongdu, you are actually very good. Hyuga Satoru sighed, trying to make his voice as soft as possible. I just want to do something for everyone, no matter how small it is. When Rin and Kakashi fought, I wanted to help, but I couldn't beat Kakashi at all, so I had to run to you. I really hate that feeling of powerlessness, even though I'm obviously right next to you. Hyuga Satoru was silent. In the original work, Anko was definitely considered a genius to be accepted as a disciple by Orochimaru. However, under his influence, her trajectory changed. She was originally supposed to be Orochimaru's disciple, but now she is a bit confused by everyone. But this gap has been infinitely widened by the comparison between himself and Uchiha Rin. Red beans. Hyuga Satoru took a breath, put his hands on her shoulders, and tried to speak in a gentle tone. You are actually very good, but you may not be so conspicuous among us. As long as you find your strengths and persevere, you will definitely become an excellent ninja. Do you understand? Anko nodded and responded softly. Hyuga Satoru sighed slightly. Maybe after returning this time, he will discuss with Teacher Jue and give Hongdu a special training. Under the guidance of Hyuga Satoru, Anko's mood improved significantly. The two stopped for a while and then began to search for the last stronghold in the intelligence. This location is quite secretive. Hyuga Satoru searched for it for a long time but found no trace of them. It seems that Anbu, who was in charge of the survey, only inferred from the trajectories of the bandits that the other party's stronghold was in the nearby area. It's just the specific location. I'm afraid they didn't discover it. There's some trouble now. Hyuga Satoru curled his lips helplessly and looked up at the place where he and Aburame Jue agreed to meet. It was already very far away from here. If there is no harvest, we can only go back and meet them first, and then discuss countermeasures. He glanced around and saw that the place was very close to the coast, with an unobstructed view. There were only patches of woods and a cliff near the sea. If there is a bandit stronghold near here, it should be easily discovered. Weird. Hyuga frowned involuntarily. Next to him, Hongdu suddenly said in confusion, Satoru, I don't understand why those bandits put their base here. This place doesn't seem to be suitable for a base. Why put the base here? Suddenly, a flash of lightning flashed in Hyuga's mind, and he vaguely felt that he had caught something. Since the group of bandits set up their base near here, it naturally means that there is a place here that can meet their purpose. He quickly glanced around, and his eyes gradually stopped on the cliff next to the coast. Hongdu, Don't move around here. I'll go over and take a look. Arriving at the foot of the cliff and looking up at the cliff, Hyuga Satoru opened his Byakugan and found some clues. These bandits actually have such great perseverance. There are traces of man-made excavations on the cliff. From Byan's perspective, he can clearly see the locations of iron awls, ropes and other footings carved on the cliff. Following those traces all the way up, he discovered that there is a huge giant on the top of the cliff, of potholes. This is also the reason why his search has been fruitless. If he does not come to the foot of the cliff, the range of his white eyes and electromagnetic perception will not be able to cover it. Hyuga smiled. No wonder they chose to use this place as a stronghold. On the top of the cliff, no merchant ships coming from the nearby waters can escape their surveillance. After thinking about this, Hyuga jumped up, stepped on the raised rock wall, jumped again, and kept approaching the top of the cliff. The strength of the group of bandits is not very strong. It would be too time-consuming to kill them with a long-range sniper. It would be more time-saving to go directly into the stronghold. In the forest, Enko couldn't help but become anxious. Satoru has been away for so long, why haven't you come back yet? Is there any accident? The location they were in was far away from Konoha village, and it was also the most chaotic area in the country of fire. Ninjas from other villages often appeared. This is why Hokage arranged for them to destroy the bandits. Hyuga Satoru didn't return for a long time, which made her worried. At this moment, a familiar voice sounded, making her nervous heart finally relax. Hongdu, let's go meet Teacher Jiwei. Hyuga Satoru came over from the forest and smiled at him. As the mission accomplished. Well, now it's over as long as we meet up with Teacher Jiwei. With his and Rin's abilities, it should be solved. Is that so? Speaking of which, I haven't done anything to help you. Enko couldn't help but sigh. Don't say that, Hongdu, if you hadn't reminded me, I wouldn't have discovered the location of their stronghold at all. Maybe they are still wandering around like a headless fly now. Let's hurry up and meet Teacher Jiwei. Yeah, Hongdu responded softly. The agreed-upon meeting place was far away from here. After walking for a while, Hyuga Satoru looked back at the gray sky above the sea, and could vaguely see thunder and lightning flashing through it. Hyuga Satoru frowned. It looks like it's going to rain heavily. Let's speed up. The two sped up and quickly shuttled through the woods. After walking for a while, Hyuga Satoru suddenly looked solemn, grabbed Enko beside him, and whispered. Wait, Enko, there are two ninjas from other villages ahead. Hearing this, Enko also stopped and looked at Hyuga Satoru nervously. Satoru, are you the enemy? It's not clear yet, but they are probably very strong. Hyuga Satoru looked quite solemn. Just now, he suddenly discovered that two very powerful biological magnetic fields broke into his perception. They were definitely very powerful ninjas. Byakugan quietly opened. Hyuga Satoru subconsciously took a breath after seeing the forehead protector pattern on the other person's forehead and the ninja sword on the back of one of them. Enko, let's retreat. The opponent is the 7 ninja swordsmen. 7 ninja swordsmen. Hearing these 5 words, Hongdu's heart seemed to be squeezed hard by a big hand. That is the most powerful humanoid weapon in Kurigakure village. Each of the 7 is an extremely powerful elite jonin, and she has heard of their cruelty and bloodshed even as far away as the Fire Country. Are they both members of the 7 ninja swordsmen? Enko swallowed and asked subconsciously. No, the other one is not, but his strength may be even more terrifying. Hyuga Satoru silently held his breath. The biomagnetic field of the person without the ninja sword was actually stronger than Aburame Shiwei. Even if Master Jiwei was here, he would never dare to face 2 people at the same time. Not knowing whether the other party had the ability to sense, Hyuga Satoru did not dare to make too much noise for fear of being caught by the other party. The surrounding air seemed to freeze into ice, and the movements of the 2 people slowed down. They held their breath and retreated slowly. At this moment, the 2 people in the white eyes moved. The speed is quite fast, and it is constantly approaching here. Did you still get noticed? Hyuga Satoru looked extremely ugly. In the crisis of life and death, Hyuga Satoru took a deep breath and tried his best to calm down his brain. Hongdu, run quickly and find Teacher Jiwei. How about you? I'll stop them here. The opponent's speed is far faster than ours. If I don't stay to stop them, none of us will be able to escape, let alone. Hyuga Satoru took a deep breath, with a strong fighting spirit flashing in his eyes. It's not like I have no chance at all. The white mist dissipated, and the ninja sword Long Fang was already in his hand. At this distance, it was too late for him to use his bow and arrow to resist. The next second, with a roar, the big tree in front of them was suddenly cut off with great force, and dust billowed up. Maro, your nose is really sensitive. It does smell like fresh blood here. After the dust dissipated, two figures suddenly appeared. One of them carried a huge ninja sword on his shoulder, and there were scarlet blood-like lines next to the sharp teeth. Ha ha ha, Juzang, I told you earlier, but you still don't believe it. The other person's laughter was sharp and harsh, like sharpened nails scratching a blackboard, giving Hyuga and Satoru a shuddering feeling. His eyebrows are two dots of scarlet, and there are thick dark circles around his eyes. Combined with the cruel smile on his face, he looks quite ferocious and terrifying. The user of the beheading sword, Loquat Juzo, elite Jonin of the Wei Yoruichi clan, Hyuga Satoru took a breath after seeing the person clearly. Looks like he's a ninja from Konoha. Juzang Juzo raised his ninja sword and squinted at the gap the size of a grain of rice on the blade. There is a gap in my beheading sword, and it can be repaired with your blood. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly jumped into the air and slammed the thick ninja sword towards Hyuga Satoru's position. Clang! The huge power was transmitted to Hyuga Satoru's arm along the ninja sword's long fang, causing his body to feel numb, and he couldn't help but take a few steps back. Enko swallowed subconsciously. Woo, I'm going to find Teacher Jiwei. Knowing that staying here would only hinder Hyuga Satoru, Enko calmed down and ran towards the back of the forest without hesitation. Want to escape? A sharp look flashed in Loquat Juzang's eyes, and with a wave of his right hand, he hit Enko with his decapitating sword. When the slender blade of the long fang pressed firmly against the beheading sword, crushing his plan. In this brief moment of stalemate, Hongdo's back had disappeared into the jungle. Kid, a hint of anger appeared on Loquat Juzang's face. Hey, Juzang, can you do it? You actually let a prey escape. Kagaya Maro's dissatisfied voice reached his ears, making the anger on his face even deeper. Shut up, leave this brat to me. You go chase the escaped prey. Loquat Juzang stared at Hyuga Satoru with anger and a trace of doubt in his eyes. He discovered that the reason why Hyuga Satoru was able to stop him when his strength was far inferior to his own was because a powerful attraction appeared on his decapitating sword. The power can escape at any time. In order to avoid this situation, he had to devote a large part of his mind to suppress the abnormal movements of the sword, and then Hyuga Satoru blocked him one after another. Kid, no matter what secrets you have, you can only become a dead soul under my sword. After being blocked one after another, Loquat Juzo's anger reached its peak, and blue chakra spurted out, directly wrapping the entire beheading sword. Not good. Feeling the increased power coming from the blade, Hyuga subconsciously clenched his teeth. CC. Under the violent crushing of Loquat Juzang, with the sound of sparks flying, the long-tusked blade actually cut open the decapitating sword, sinking in bit by bit. Until the entire blade was inserted into the decapitating sword. Loquat Juzang suddenly twisted. Clang! There was a crisp sound of metal collision, and the long-tusked blade was suddenly broken into several pieces of metal fragments. The huge beheading sword finally lost its resistance and hit Hyuga Satoru's body hard. Hyuga Satoru flew backwards far away like a kite with a broken string. Scarlet blood continued to drip down the wound, and Loquat Juzang's pupils trembled slightly, staring at his abdomen in disbelief. There were several sharp metal fragments embedded deeply into the muscles, and blood flowed gurglingly. I finally understood the source of that weird resistance. He suddenly raised his head, with a hint of ferocity in his eyes, staring at Hyuga Satoru, who got up from the ground. Magnet style, I didn't expect you to have double bloodstains. If he hadn't noticed it before, it was no longer obvious the moment the tusks broke. The fragments of the ninja sword that were originally flying around suddenly concentrated on his abdomen, as if controlled by some force. Wying village is the village with the most blood inheritance limits, so he quickly thought of the double blood stains. Magnet style, and it is a magnet style that prefers to control the ninja sword. Looking at Hyuga Satoru's slightly childish face, he felt murderous intent in his heart. This child must not be kept. Magnet style, who can control the ninja sword, is still so young. Once he fully grows up, I am afraid that the 7 ninja swordsmen will be eliminated from the ninja world. Maro, don't worry about that woman for now, I found an interesting prey. Hey, Juzang, are you making a mistake? One moment you let me chase you, and the next moment you don't let me chase you. Do you think I'm your subordinate? Kagaya Maro was very unhappy and shouted loudly. This Hyuga brat is a double bloodstain. Kagaya Maro's face froze, and she narrowed her eyes slightly, looking up and down at Hyuga Satoru. You are not mistaken, it seems that the Hyuga clan has never heard of the awakening of double bloodstains. It's not wrong, it must be magnet style. Really, what is the village's intelligence agency doing? There were 2 bloodstains in Konoha but they were not reported. Kagaya Maro was obviously interested as well, staring at Hyuga Satoru. This was the first time he saw the double bloodstains of the Hyuga family. Loquat Juzang pulled out the last fragment of his abdomen, wiped his abdomen with his palm, and quickly wiped the beheading knife, and a scarlet blood mark appeared on the blade. After absorbing the blood, the decapitating sword actually started to squirm, as if it was alive, and the gap in the middle of the blade disappeared. The horizontal sword was pointed at Hyuga Satoru, and the coldness in Loquat Juzang's eyes showed. Let me use my own blood to repair the sword, and you will be the first. Looking at this scene, Hyuga couldn't help but click his tongue. Sure enough, the ninja world is not scientific at all. The huge gap in the beheading sword can be repaired with just a little blood. Is this blood made of iron? There was no fear in his heart, and the intense fire of war was burning in his eyes. Let me see what that technique can do. His eyes slowly closed, chakra surged crazily, attacking the 4 acupuncture points of his body. At the same time, his breath suddenly became stronger, and a layer of air waves surrounded his body. When his eyes opened again, blue lightning arcs had completely enveloped his body. Tyrant mode. Forest. Big trees fell to the ground in a mess, the air was filled with the smell of dust and blood, and the sound of thunder arcs beating was extremely obvious in such a special environment. Hyuga Satoru's feet left the ground and floated in the air, thunder arcs dancing in his black hair, and his clothes whirring in the wind and waves surging around him. Just like a transformed Super Saiyan. Loquat Juzang squinted his eyes and stared at Hyuga Satoru, who was wrapped in lightning. In just a short moment, he suddenly felt that the aura on the other person's body was several times larger. Some kind of secret technique to improve strength in the short term. Similar to Raikage's lightning-style chakra mode. GG, I didn't expect you to have such ability. Such prey is interesting. Kagaya Maro let out a harsh laugh, and something was squirming under the skin visible to the naked eye. 2 sharp bone spurs came out of the palm of his hand and were held firmly in his hand. Maro, he is my prey. Loquat Juzang's eyes flashed with coldness, chakra surged in his body, and he suddenly rushed towards the floating Hyuga Satoru. The decapitating sword was packed with terrifying power and struck him hard. Bang! Following a dull sound, Loquat Juzang's eyes suddenly shrank. How can it be? I saw Hyuga Satoru raising his hand to block the blade of the beheading sword. The huge sword was unable to move forward at all, and was frozen in place. What secret technique is this? Why did your magnet style suddenly become so strong? Loquat Juzang was shocked. Hyuga Satoru's palm did not touch the decapitating sword. To be precise, when he was still 1 centimeter away, a terrifying repulsive force appeared on the decapitating sword, like a mountain. No matter how hard he tried, he could not shake it at all. However, a scene that made him even more horrified appeared. The huge blade of the decapitation sword actually began to dissolve. Starting from the position held by Hyuga Satoru's hand, it melted into a silver metallic liquid and slowly flowed along Hyuga Satoru's arm. In just a few breaths, most of the blade had been decomposed. Loquat Juzang's pupils trembled slightly, and he no longer dared to stand still. He immediately let go of the beheading knife and quickly retreated in horror. Maru, there's something weird about this kid. Juzang, wasn't the attack blocked? When did you become so timid? Kagaya Maro laughed mockingly, but because of the obstruction of Loquat Juzo's body, he did not see the shocking scene. Hyuga Satoru has completely decomposed the decapitating sword. The silver metal fluid seems to be alive, like a small silver snake, slowly swimming around his shoulders and arms. Matter decomposes. Under the terrifying bonus of Tyrant mode, Hyuga Satoru finally reached the threshold of material decomposition. Although it is not yet at the atomic level, the entire beheading sword is disassembled into tiny particles with a diameter of less than 10 nanometers. The metal in this special state will retain metallic and fluid properties, commonly known as magnetic fluid, able to infinitely switch between fluid and solid forms. With his eyes fixed on loquat Juzo, Hyuga realized something and rushed over like a thunderbolt. A strong life and death crisis completely enveloped him. Chills erupted from the tailbone and ran up the spine to the back of the head. Loquat Juzo was horrified. Without the decapitation sword, he was not much stronger than an ordinary jonin and was unable to withstand this blow. He didn't even have time to dodge. Hyuga Satoru's attack had already arrived. The small silver snake squirmed at extremely fast speeds, sprang out from his arm, transformed into an arc-shaped scimitar, and instantly slashed across his throat. Poof! The world seemed to turn into scarlet. Loquat Juzang suddenly felt that his body became lighter, and all the objects in his field of vision were turning over. At the last moment when his consciousness faded, he seemed to hear a chuckle coming from his ears. "I like your sword very much." Snap! His head fell to the ground, but he still kept his frightened face, lifelike. Juzu. Kagaya swallowed sluggishly. The battle situation changed so fast that he didn't even have time to react. He only saw Loquat Juzo retreating in fear for some unknown reason. Then, Hyuga Satoru counterattacked, and Loquat Juzo's head was thrown high. The remaining blood on the silver scimitar seeped into the metal. After absorbing this part of the blood, the silver snake seemed to be sharper. Hyuga Satoru was delighted. Sure enough, the magnetically fluidized decapitation sword still retained the ability to absorb blood. Asshole! Kagaya clenched his teeth. Extreme anger burst out of his mind, making his eyes become bloodshot. Visible to the naked eye, there was violent squirming under the skin, and with the sound of flesh being pierced, sharp bone spurs actually pierced his body. The chest, elbows, and spine are full of sharp bone spurs, like ferocious monsters. Hyuga Satoru's expression became a little more solemn. The reason why he could defeat Loquat Juzo so easily was because the opponent was a sword ninja and was completely restrained by his ability. The calcium in the bones mainly exists in the form of inorganic salts, which is difficult to be magnetized. In addition, the Wei Yoruichi tribe has an almost crazy desire to fight. Next is the real battle. 10 finger-piercing bullets. Kagaya roared, raised 10 fingers and pointed them at Hyuga Satoru. White bones squirmed out from the fingertips and burst out. Hyuga Satoru didn't dodge. The silver snake flowed quickly and turned into a silver metal shield, blocking it in front of him. Clang clang clang. With the sound of metal meeting metal, all 10 bone bullets were blocked. It's not over yet. The moment the silver shield melted, Kagaya, who looked like an evil ghost, had rushed to Hyuga Satoru's side. Sharp bone spurs emerged from his knees, and he hit Hyuga Satoru hard with a whip kick. The silver snake squirmed again and blocked Kagaya attack. The silver-white metal pressed against Kagaya thigh slowly flowed along the white bone spurs towards his body. Kagaya felt a chill all over his body, and immediately stepped back, swung his palm into a knife, and quickly cut off the flowing bone spurs of the silver snake. How prudent! Hyuga Satoru couldn't help but secretly thought that it was a pity that as long as the metal entered Kagaya body, the outcome of this battle was already doomed. But I didn't expect that the other party would also retain a high degree of caution when he was almost crazy. It seemed that this person was definitely not an unknown person in the Wei Yoruichi clan. I don't know what he had to do with the future Kagaya Kimimaro. With the addition of Tyrant mode, he has many abilities that he could not use before. But there is still a long way to go before he can control matter at the atomic level. Otherwise, he could directly control the calcium ions in Kagaya body and cause him to die suddenly. Kid, you've completely pissed me off. After passing through the gate of hell, Kagaya could no longer suppress his anger, and the chakra in his body surged crazily. Early fern dance. A large number of bone spurs emerged from the ground around him, springing up like bamboo shoots after a spring rain, and quickly spread throughout the battlefield. The body of Loquat Shazang next to him was forcibly pierced into pieces by the chaotic growth of bone spurs. Hyuga Satoru's body quickly floated upward to avoid the attack of bone spurs. Looking down from midair, a forest of bones has suddenly appeared. The white jungle appeared out of thin air in the forest that Hyuga Satoru overlooked, showing a solemn expression. There is not much time left to maintain the tyrant mode, and it cannot be delayed any longer. Taking out a scroll, the white mist dissipated, and a large number of kunai shurikens appeared out of thin air, floating in the air behind him. Establishing electromagnetic push, the kunai shuriken slowly rotated, blue lightning arcs intertwined through it, and instantly wrapped all the ninja tools, forming a grid of lightning arcs. Hyuga Satoru raised his hand and waved it down. In an instant, the floating ninja behind him suddenly turned into an electromagnetic gun, shooting towards the ground at an extremely fast speed, making a rumbling sound. A large number of bone spurs were shattered by the electromagnetic cannon, and bone fragments mixed with dust flew everywhere. Hyuga Satoru frowned slightly, and from the perspective of Byakugan, he did not expect the scene of Kageyamaru being hit. Did you teleport in advance to avoid the attack? It's such a troublesome ability. Hayabra's dance is Macabre Bone Pulse's ultimate move, and Toru Yoruichi can teleport to any location covered by bone spurs. Suddenly, a chill came from behind. Hyuga Satoru didn't look back. The small silver snakes surrounding his body squirmed quickly and turned into a shield to block him behind. Clang! At the moment when the shield was just formed, a huge impact exploded along the shield, causing his body to stumble slightly and move forward a few steps in midair. Behind him, Kageyamaru's lower body was connected to a huge bone spur, and it stretched for more than 10 meters. He appeared behind Hyuga Satoru, and his right hand turned into a huge spiral bone spur, which was pressing against the silver shield. You really don't have a long memory. Hyuga Satoru endured the surge of energy and blood, and a coldness flashed in his eyes. A small metal snake suddenly branched out from the silver shield and swam towards Kageyamaru's body along the spiral bone spurs. His pupils suddenly shrank. Kageyamaru didn't dare to hesitate anymore, and actually disintegrated the bone spur in his right hand, and his body quickly descended, submerging into the forest of white forest again. Hyuga Satoru tore open a scroll again, and a large number of metal ninja tools appeared. Under the terrifying blessing of electromagnetic propulsion, they turned into electromagnetic cannons and shot towards the ground. Rumble! A large number of bone spurs were destroyed, revealing a messy ground. However, the white jungle seemed to be alive, spreading rapidly and engulfing the gap. Are you planning to delay? Hyuga Satoru narrowed his eyes. The time the tyrant mode can last is running out, and this guy must be dealt with as soon as possible. He looked back at the place where Hongdo left, and murmured, "It has been so long, Hongdo must have run away." Immediately, he took a deep breath and held back no longer. The chakra in his body surged crazily. Pointing his right hand at the earth, he shook it suddenly. In an instant, the ground began to tremble unbelievably. Along with the shaking of the ground, a large number of metal jungles rose from the ground, swallowing up a large number of trees in the forest, and strangled the forest of bones crazily. Deep in the bone forest, Kageyamaru's pupils trembled slightly. What kind of technique is this? Chakra surged wildly, controlling the bone forest to grow again, trying to compete with the metal jungle, but it only condensed slightly and was immediately crushed into bone fragments. With the rumbling sound, the black metal jungle completely suppressed Senbai's bone forest and continued to push towards the center. Hyuga Satoru, who was clenching his fists in midair, shook his head slightly. That metal jungle evacuated almost all the metal particles in the 10-mile radius of the land, and continuously compressed the gaps between the particles, greatly increasing its density. Its hardness is far beyond what bone can match. Suddenly, his face turned pale and he staggered in midair. Is it almost time for tyrant mode? In the distance, Hongdu, who was running away, noticed the shaking of the earth and immediately turned around. She saw a large amount of black metal drilling through the ground, impacting crazily with the forest of white bones in the middle. The battle between black and white can be clearly seen even here. That is, Hongdo's pupils trembled slightly. She saw a tiny figure swaying above the rising metal jungle, as if it might fall at any time. Woo! Rumble! In the air, Hyuga Satoru's face turned pale, and he gritted his teeth and squeezed the last chakra. Below, the black metal jungle has swallowed up most of the bone forest, and is constantly approaching the center. Seeing that he could no longer block the metal jungle, Uemaru's face became crazy, his eyes burst out with a lot of ferocious bloodshot eyes, and he roared hoarsely. I'm going to die, and you have to bury me with you. The crazy bloodline of Hui's Yoruichi tribe completely engulfed him at the last moment, and he gave up contending with the metal jungle. He mobilized all the remaining chakra, causing the surrounding bone forest to grow and spread upward at a rapid speed, and suddenly rushed towards Hyuga Satoru in midair. This is his fatal blow. Without the support of chakra, the speed at which bone forest was swallowed up by the metal jungle greatly increased. In the blink of an eye, it was by his side. Countless hard black metals penetrated his body and dyed the surrounding white bones red. He was laughing, crazy laugh. Ha ha ha, you have to die too, you have to die too. The rapidly growing bone spurs had already arrived, and the eyes on Hyuga Satoru's pale face shrank. The massive consumption of his body made it almost impossible for him to avoid it. The silver snake flowed quickly and blocked the important parts of his body. Poof! Several bone spurs pierced his body, and blood followed the white bone spurs and fell drop by drop to the metal jungle below. The blue lightning arc beating between the ends of his hair disappeared, and Hyuga Satoru felt severe pain completely wrap around him. Tyrant mode is over. Suddenly there was a thunder in the gray sky. Hyuga Satoru raised his head weakly, and a drop of cold rain hit his face. Then, the second drop. The rain washed away the blood on his face and took away the remaining heat from his body. It's raining. His eyes looking at the sky trembled slightly, and he whispered softly, his voice too weak to be heard. The heavy rain that had been gathering for a long time finally fell at the moment when the battle came to an end. Wow, the rain in June always comes fiercely. In just a few breaths, the rain is already very strong, and dense raindrops wash away the tragic battlefield. Next to the broken bone forest, Kageyamaru's body was pierced by the dense metal jungle. The body was already cold in the rain, with a cruel smile on his face at the last moment. Hyuga Satoru used his last strength to move his body out of the bone spurs bit by bit, and fell in midair. The silver snakes surrounding his body condensed into a metal sphere the size of a fist, and fell with him, to the ruins. In the heavy rain, Hyuga Satoru's eyelids seemed to be filled with lead and became extremely heavy. In a daze, he seemed to feel that he was being carried by someone. He was walking staggeringly in the heavy rain, and a trace of warmth passed from the other person's body. At the last moment, his consciousness fell into darkness. Konoha Hospital. In one of the top wards, there were bursts of anxious sounds. The injured person has lost too much blood and needs a blood transfusion immediately. Most of the muscles in his body were torn and there were 6 puncture wounds. Oh my god, he actually persisted for so long. Medical class, prepare to master Sage Jutsu. In the corridor outside the ward, Aburame Jawei and others were waiting anxiously, and the atmosphere was somewhat depressing and heavy. It's all my fault. If it weren't for me, Satoru wouldn't be in danger. Hongdu hugged her knees and huddled on the ground next to the ward, crying. Aburame Jawei knelt down, patted her shoulder with his generous hand, and comforted, "No, Anko, if you hadn't carried Satoru back regardless of the danger, I'm afraid the situation would have been worse. If I have to say it, it's me who should blame myself. As your teacher, I didn't arrive at the scene as soon as possible when the students were in danger." Aburame sighed slightly and gradually fell silent. He couldn't describe it in words, when he saw Anko trembling, carrying Hyuga Satoru, who was dripping with blood, step by step, walking in the heavy rain. In all the years he has been a ninja, there has never been a moment like that, when his heart seemed to be hit hard by something. Hyuga Satoru was seriously injured. To be honest, he couldn't believe that he was still alive in that situation. Not daring to delay, after taking some simple measures to stop the bleeding, he rushed back to Konoha village with a few people without stopping. Thus, the current scene emerged. Uchiha Lin leaned against the cold wall next to the door of the ward, looking up at the ceiling. She didn't know what she was thinking, she just felt that her hands and feet were cold. "Satoru, if you don't make it through, what should I do?" Only this thought has been surrounding her. She hated it so much. She hated that she wasn't there. She hated that she wasn't the one who teamed up with Satoru at that time. Wasn't it the 7 ninja swordsmen? Wasn't it Jonin from the Toru Yoruichi clan? Wouldn't it be better to kill them? Just then, the door opened. "How's Satoru doing?" Three voices sounded almost at the same time, looking anxiously at the medical ninja who opened the door. How should I put it? Although his injuries are very serious, his body is very special and has been actively repairing the wounds. The medical ninja groaned and said, "Honestly, in all the years I have been a medical ninja, I have never seen a ninja with such a special body." "Really? Does that mean Satoru is out of danger?" Enko asked anxiously. "I advise you not to be too optimistic." The medical ninja glanced at her. He seems to have used some kind of forbidden technique that costs a lot of money. Coupled with the impact of the injury, it is hard to say whether there will be any sequelae. Quote. Enko's heart clenched again. Uchiha Rin breathed a sigh of relief. "Is it just a sequelae? That's okay. I'll take care of him in the future." At this moment, the medical ninja sighed again. "Oh, it would be great if Tsunade-sama is here. With her medical skills, she can definitely solve it easily." "Tsunade." Aburame Shimi's eyes flickered under the mask. "I can invite her over. If it were me, she would probably sell her a favor." "It's useless." The medical ninja glanced at him, shook his head and said, "Tsunade-sama has suffered from severe hemophobia and has stopped treating patients for a long time. Only a small number of medical ninjas know this news. You don't know. It's normal." "Is this so?" Aburame Jawei's heart became heavy. None of the three people were talking or asking, and the scene suddenly became quiet. The medical ninja was suddenly pulled aside and whispered something. "Is this so?" Lord Hokage ordered that Hyuga Satoru be treated at all costs. Okay. I see." After hearing their low-pitched discussion, the expressions of Aburame Jawei and others softened. At this moment, I suddenly heard a cry in the ward. "He's awake." Several people cheered up and rushed into the ward immediately. On the hospital bed, Hyuga Satoru opened his eyes, and his pure white pupils looked around suspiciously. "Satoru." Enko rushed over and said with a hint of apology. "I was the one holding you back." Hyuga Satoru raised his head weakly with a smile. "I said, you just haven't found your strengths. As long as you find them, you will definitely become an excellent ninja. By the way, I brought this back to you too." Enko seemed to have remembered something, and took out a fist-sized silver white metal sphere from her arms and handed it to Hyuga Satoru. "Because I saw Satoru holding on to this thing even though he was seriously injured, I guessed it was important to Satoru, so I brought it back with him." "Very good." Hyuga Satoru showed a smile on his weak face and took the ball, with a trace of body temperature still on it. "By the way, Satoru, what is this? Why is it so heavy?" Hyuga Satoru thought for a while and said, "Well, if I have to say it, it should be considered a very powerful weapon. Arms. Uchiha Rin was also attracted by the silver ball in Hyuga Satoru's hand. It seemed to be a special chakra metal, but Satoru said it was a weapon. Hitting people. Hyuga Satoru tried to use electromagnetic force to communicate with the silver ball in his hand. After receiving a response, the smile on his face deepened. Sure enough, just as he expected, under the transformation of the tyrant mode's surge in electromagnetic power, this metal already has the ability to catalyze him in his current state. In other words, even if he does not enter tyrant mode, he can switch forms at will just like he fought against Kageyamaru. If he wants a sword, he turns it into a sword. If he wants a shield, he turns it into a shield. He can even turn it into an arrow and shoot it with a magnetic storm sniper, but it's a little troublesome to recycle it. To put it simply, it is already in the shape of enlightenment. This is no ordinary chakra metal. Among the 7 ninja swordsmen, the decapitating sword is the most powerful. Apart from being able to absorb blood and repair it, it has no special abilities. But this ability bursts into new glory in the hands of Hyuga Satoru. The magnetically fluidized decapitation sword also retains this characteristic. The more you kill, the more blood you absorb, the stronger you will become. Do you think a weapon that absorbs blood and evolves is not scary? At this moment, a hoarse voice suddenly came from in front of the ward door. I heard that Wujun was seriously injured. I wonder if I can help. Hyuga looked over and immediately narrowed his eyes. The person who came had pale skin, purple eyeshadow at the corners of his eyes, and was looking at him with a smile. Cold Lord, Orochimaru. It's actually Orochimaru-sama. What are you doing here, Orochimaru-sama? In the ward, Orochimaru, who was one of the Sannin along with Tsunade, shot the medical ninja next to him as soon as he appeared. Orochimaru smiled slightly and said, "In terms of medical ninjutsu, although I am not as good as Tsunade, I still have certain attainments. I think I can still help." Anko stared at Orochimaru curiously. Is this Orochimaru, one of the Sannin? I don't know why, but when she first saw Orochimaru, she had a strange feeling. Why is Orochimaru here? On the hospital bed, Hyuga frowned slightly. He is still somewhat defensive about Lang Lord Orochimaru. The important thing is that I am in a very bad state now. If the other party wants to do anything. Of course I am here for Wu Jun. I think I can definitely help Wu Jun. If possible, I would like to spend some time alone with Wu Jun. Is that okay? Orochimaru's voice was sincere, and the eyes of Aburame Shiwei and others focused on Hyuga Satoru. Hyuga Satoru pondered for a moment. At this period, Orochimaru had not defected yet. He was obsessed with chasing immortality until he died. Aburame Shiwei was also outside, so there should be no problems. Most importantly, Orochimaru really has what he needs. Good. Boom. The door of the ward was closed, leaving only Orochimaru and Hyuga Satoru in the empty ward. Master Orochimaru, I wonder what you want when you come here this time. Hyuga Satoru said straight to the point. He didn't believe Orochimaru was really here just to heal him. As expected of Mr. Wu, you have indeed noticed my purpose. One of the 7 ninja swordsmen and 1 elite jonin of the Wei Yoruichi clan. This kind of lineup may even make me choose to retreat. Satoru-kun actually survived, tisk tisk. Maybe more than just surviving. Hyuga Satoru looked at him indifferently. Could it be? Orochimaru's eyes flashed, he took a deep breath, and his expression changed from playful to solemn. Hyuga Satoru thought to himself, it seems that Anko just told them about the enemy he encountered, and the battle situation was not known yet. But thinking about it carefully, when Anko arrived, the opponent's body had been submerged in the metal jungle. But Orochimaru still needs to throw some punches. After all, it can be very dangerous to deal with such a snake if you don't show enough capital. Orochimaru brought his emotions back from shock, walked to Hyuga Satoru, and looked at his body with a click of his tongue. The more he observed, the deeper the smile in his eyes became, and he couldn't help but admire. He is worthy of being the first double-blooded ninja in the history of Hyuga, the first genius of the new generation. This strange body, unparalleled vitality, and a strange power seemed to be repairing injuries. Quote, Orochimaru-sama has such an accurate eye. Hyuga Satoru said lightly, his body has been quenched by 3 electromagnetic upgrades, and has long been far superior to ordinary people, and the spontaneous adjustment of the life magnetic field is allowing his injuries to be continuously repaired. But if this is the case, it will inevitably leave some sequelae. After all, Wu Jun, you seem to have used some kind of expensive forbidden technique, and you have suffered some damage at the cellular level. Orochimaru clicked his tongue a few times, and in just a few minutes, he came to a more accurate conclusion than those medical ninjas had in hours. Hyuga was speechless. Tyrant mode will greatly squeeze mental power and chakra. When chakra is squeezed to the limit, there is a risk of cell damage. This is also the reason why he needs to cultivate for a long time after using Tyrant. His spirit and body are close to the limit. I've come to the right place. This is the cell activation secret technique. It took me 3 years to develop. It can not only repair Wu Jun's cell damage, but also make Wu Jun's special physique stronger. So, what's the price? Hyuga Satoru said solemnly. Orochimaru smiled. Cells, your fresh cell samples, hair, blood samples, the only double blood heir in Hyuga's history, and this extremely rare special physique, I can't wait to explore. Haha, Wu Jun is indeed a cheerful person. After saying that, Orochimaru took out a scroll and spread out items such as test tubes, scalpels, and pliers in the middle. I will be very careful not to hurt Wu-kun. The corner of Hyuga Satoru's mouth twitched slightly. This Orochimaru, even at this time, made himself feel disgusted. The collection of samples is not complicated, and Orochimaru's movements are also very subtle, at least in appearance there is not much change. Hyuga Satoru stared carefully, making sure that nothing was done. After finishing it, he handed the scroll to Hyuga Satoru. The cultivation method of cell activation is not complicated. With Wu Jun's memory, I believe he can remember it quickly, and then he can try to practice it in the hospital bed. I believe Woojun will like it. Orochimaru turned around to leave, but suddenly a calm voice sounded behind him. Wait, Orochimaru, what's wrong? I hope we can work together in the future. Hyuga Satoru looked at him calmly. Orochimaru was stunned for a moment, then suddenly laughed. Haha, Woojun is indeed a very ambitious person. What purpose does Hyuga Satoru have to cooperate with this snake? In other words, is there something constraining him that forces him to cooperate with him? Hyuga Branch House. As soon as these 4 words came out of his mind, Orochimaru understood them instantly. Caged bird. I am the most famous scientific research ninja in Konoha. I am afraid that only by finding him can I have any hope of cracking the caged bird. Somehow, Orochimaru suddenly began to look forward to the cooperation between them. How terrifying would a Hyuga Satoru without any restraints be? Thinking of this, he smiled and opened the door of the ward. Satoru, how's it going? Are you okay? Several people who were waiting anxiously outside immediately rushed into the ward. I'm fine. Hyuga Satoru smiled at them and nodded. Since Mr. Wu no longer needs me, I will go back. Orochimaru got what he wanted and couldn't wait to return to the laboratory. This is really troublesome, Orochimaru-sama. I didn't expect Orochimaru-sama to be able to heal ninjutsu. Hyuga Satoru's face looks much better. The surrounding medical ninjas subconsciously flattered Orochimaru. Orochimaru nodded and walked out of the ward. Beside the hospital bed, Hongdu subconsciously clenched his hands and struggled with his eyes, as if he was making a difficult decision. Soon, she took a deep breath, ran to the corridor, bowed deeply to the back of Orochimaru who had not gone far, buried her head in her chest, and said loudly. Lord Orochimaru, please accept me as your disciple. Lord Orochimaru, please accept me as your disciple. Enko's voice was unusually clear in the empty corridor. Orochimaru's steps froze in midair, and he turned around and looked at her calmly. Hongdu didn't raise his head. He was still bowing, but the face buried in his chest was more determined than ever. Why do you want to be my disciple? Orochimaru looked Enko up and down with a playful smile. Red beans. Almost everyone in the ward was shocked by this sudden scene. There was a hint of surprise in Uchiha Rin's eyes. That was Orochimaru, one of the Sannin. I didn't expect Enko, the timid girl, to have such courage. But why does she have to become a disciple of Orochimaru? Aburame sighed slightly. He also noticed Enko's recent changes, but he didn't expect her to have such courage. However, he didn't have any hope that Enko would become Orochimaru's disciple. Orochimaru was notoriously vicious among Jonin. Hongdu has been under her for so long, so in terms of talent, he is not very good. I hope she can withstand this blow. A faint smile appeared on Hyuga Satoru's face. Is this a fateful encounter? Or is it a self-correction of the timeline? Enko, who had not become Orochimaru's disciple under his influence, actually mustered up the courage to ask Orochimaru to become his disciple. Why do you want to be my disciple? In the corridor, Orochimaru's voice was still playing in Enko's ears, making her slightly stunned. Why must I become Orochimaru-sama's disciple? Enko asked herself this in her heart. Suddenly, a picture appeared in her mind. Encountering an invincible enemy, she could only run away like crazy. In the heavy rain, Hyuga saw her covered in bruises in the ruins. Memories came in like a tide, swallowing her up in an instant. She clenched her fists subconsciously, tears fell down, and her voice trembled. Because I hate my own incompetence and my weakness. Lord Orochimaru, please accept me as your disciple. I want to have power, I want to protect my companions. I want. Hongdo bowed deeper, clenching her fists tightly, and the floor in front of her was covered with her tears. I don't know since when, there has been silence in the ward. Hongdo's mournful voice came here sentence by sentence from the corridor, like a hammer, hitting their hearts again and again. Aburame she sighed slightly. Maybe I, as a teacher, am irresponsible and have not developed her true potential. He couldn't help but blame himself. Hyuga Satoru looked at the ceiling with a faint smile on his lips. In the corridor, Orochimaru suddenly laughed, making a hoarse voice. Want to protect your companions? Interesting idea. I agreed. What? Enko, who was still bowing her body, wondered if her ears had heard wrongly. She slowly raised her head and looked at Orochimaru with a slight hesitation. Orochimaru smiled at her and repeated, I agree, you will be my disciple from now on. Really, really, big, Orochimaru-sama, no, Orochimaru-sensei. Orochimaru smiled and nodded at her. Very good. Hongdu was so excited that she almost jumped up, and the sudden happiness almost made her faint. In fact, she didn't have much hope of becoming Orochimaru's disciple. She just thought that as long as there was a chance, she would give it a try. Unexpectedly, it actually succeeded. She happily ran into the ward and grabbed Hyuga Satoru's hand. Satoru, did you hear that Orochimaru-sama has agreed to accept me as his disciple? I heard it. Hyuga smiled helplessly at him. Can you be gentler? I'm still a wounded person. Oh, sorry. Rin, did you hear that? Well, congratulations. Teacher Jiwei. Congratulations, Anko. Orochimaru is a famous Sannin. I hope you will not be lazy under his guidance. Aburame pushed up the sunglasses on his face slightly. Although he did not expect Orochimaru to agree, he was really happy for Anko. Well, definitely. Hyuga Satoru exhaled and looked at the ceiling. The ninja world seemed to have changed a lot because of his arrival. I wonder if Orochimaru will defect to Konoha. He was a little curious about the changes in Konoha in the future. Congratulations, Anko. He looked at Anko with a smile, with a hint of complexity in his eyes. From now on, you will train with Orochimaru. Yeah, Hongdu responded softly, and subconsciously lowered his head slightly. Becoming a disciple of Orochimaru means being separated from the third class. Anko, don't worry, I'll take care of the Hokage's affairs. Aburame Jiwei said in a deep voice, becoming an Orochimaru disciple, Anko must temporarily leave the third class, and he can go to Hokage to complete the corresponding procedures. Thank you, Teacher Jiwei. Anko's voice became much softer. Although she became Orochimaru's disciple, she still felt a little uncomfortable at the thought of being separated from these companions. Anko, don't think so much. Hyuga smiled and said, we are all happy for you that you can become Orochimaru's disciple. Go ahead, Orochimaru is waiting for you outside. I look forward to the day when you grow up. Quote. Hongdu responded softly, looking at the people in the ward reluctantly, as if to keep their appearance firmly in mind. After Hongdu left, the ward was quiet for a long time. Aburame sighed slightly, looked at Hyuga Satoru, and said, I originally planned to tell you the news later, but since Hongdu has left, it doesn't hurt to tell you earlier. Hokage has specially promoted you to Chunin, which means, in the future, you may have to lead a team or perform tasks alone. The third team will be disbanded. Hyuga Satoru was lying on the hospital bed, leaning on the pillow, staring blankly at the white ceiling. Orochimaru's cell activation secret technique is very effective, and the training method is not complicated. Even in the hospital bed, cells can be quenched through the flow of chakra. After only 2 days, Hyuga Satoru had the illusion that his body was about to recover. Compared with the physical feeling of overflowing, the emptiness in his heart was the reason why he was confused now. Aburame Jiwei's voice seemed to be still playing in his mind. Hokage takes into account your current abilities, and in order to maximize your growth, you have been specially promoted to Chunin. You can take on A-level and below A-level tasks on your own. Actually, the Hokage originally planned to promote you to Special Jonin, but considering that promoting you too much at once would expose you to too much attention from other villages, I had to give up this plan for your safety. As for Rin, she will return to her family for training. Anko has become Orochimaru's disciple. As for me, I should probably return to Anbu again. The third class should be disbanded like this. Although he had known that such a day would come, it still caught him off guard that it happened so quickly. But if you think about it carefully, considering his current ability, it is difficult for him to improve through ordinary team tasks. Perhaps Hokage also took this into consideration when he specially promoted him to Chunin. In a sense, it can be considered a good thing. What he currently lacks most is his lack of experience. Performing tasks alone can quickly increase the experience he lacks. This may also be Hokage's intention. At this moment, there was a click and the door opened. Uchiha Rin walked in and placed a basket of fruits on the cabinet next to the hospital bed. Satoru, your complexion looks much better. Yeah. Uchiha Rin sat on the edge of the bed, picked up an apple, and peeled the apple with a fruit knife. For some reason, the air suddenly became quiet, leaving only the sound of apples peeling and rustling. Satoru, I may not be able to see you tomorrow. Uchiha Rin was the first to break the silence and said with a complicated expression. Is something wrong? Hyuga asked. Well, the family arranged special training for me. Since it was the clan leader who came forward, I can't refuse. I'm afraid I will be separated from you during this period of time. Have all the clan leaders come forward? Hyuga Satoru showed a look of surprise. Generally speaking, the leader of a big clan like Uchiha would rarely show up for ordinary clan members. Yes, Uchiha nodded complicatedly. I activated the double Magatama. Double Magatama. Hyuga Satoru took a slight breath. No wonder, Uchiha Rin opened the double Magatama when he was less than 11 years old. Even since the founding of Konoha, he is considered a very rare genius in the history of Uchiha. When it came to single Magatama, the Uchiha clan could still turn a blind eye, but within a year they opened double Magatama. With such a talent, it's no wonder that the clan leader came forward. But, Hyuga Satoru looked at Uchiha Rin curiously and asked, Rin, when did you activate the double Magatama? Unexpectedly, as soon as he finished speaking, Uchiha Rin suddenly had a slight blush on his cheeks, turned his head slightly, and said with a hint of impatient voice, Why are you asking so many questions? It was just some time ago that I turned it on when I encountered danger. Uchiha Rin's eyes turned to the outside of the window involuntarily, and the memory seemed to return to that day. In the heavy rain, Anko, who was soaked all over, slowly walked towards her carrying Hyuga Satoru, who didn't know whether he was alive or dead, tremblingly. Every step he took left a bright red trace of blood in the rain. For some reason, she felt as if her eyes were about to burst. When she opened them again, they were already double Magatama. How could she mention these words to Wu? After Uchiha Rin left, Hyuga adjusted his emotions and continued to practice the cell activation technique with his eyes closed. It has to be said that cell activation is a very magical secret technique, which can be regarded as the essence of Orochimaru's human body research in the first half of his life. The body cells are quenched multiple times in batches. With each quenching, the vitality of the cells will be greatly increased, thus greatly improving the user's physical skills and refining chakra ability. After the practice of cell activation, his chakra has vaguely entered the threshold of Jonin. As for the cell damage caused by forcibly squeezing chakra in tyrant mode, it had completely disappeared by the second day of practice. Exhaling a breath, Hyuga Satoru opened his eyes and couldn't help but sigh in admiration. Cell activation is indeed a secret technique that Orochimaru spent 3 years developing. Without extremely advanced research on the human body, it would have been impossible to think of this wonderful method of quenching cells. Among Orochimaru's many secret techniques, cell activation is considered the foundation. Orochimaru's substitution technique and immortal reincarnation both require cell activation to improve physical abilities. It seems that Wujun likes the secret technique I developed very much. The husky voice with a slight smile came, making Hyuga Satoru frown slightly. Orochimaru-sama, don't you know to knock on the door before coming in? I think with Wukun's perception ability, it's impossible not to know that I'm coming, right? Hyuga Satoru's brows relaxed slightly. In the sleeve of his right hand, a small silver snake was wrapped around his forearm. It was a magnetically fluidized decapitation sword. As long as his thoughts move, they will turn into sharp weapons. So he wasn't worried about Orochimaru's tricks. Master Orochimaru suddenly came to visit. What's the matter? Hyuga asked calmly. Orochimaru smiled. The test results of the cell samples I took from Wujun before came out. Because the results were quite interesting, I decided to come over and share them with Wujun. What's the result? Hyuga Satoru looked a little more solemn. Orochimaru didn't give in, and said directly, Satoru-kun's cells are very strange. Judging from the experiments, they should be approaching a certain high-level form, but... After a pause, Orochimaru suddenly changed the topic, smiled and said, Satoru-kun's Byakugan range should be much larger than that of ordinary tribesmen. Yes, Hyuga Satoru nodded, there was nothing to hide. But what does this have to do with the test results? Well, how should I put it? Wukun's physical evolution is more like an atavism, so the purity of the Byakugan will continue to increase in the process. Bloodline returned to ancestors. Hyuga Satoru took a deep breath. Orochimaru may not know the origin of the Hyuga clan's bloodline, but he knows very well Otsutsuki Kagaya. Will he evolve into a Otsutsuki in the future? In the ward, the atmosphere seemed a bit depressing. Hyuga Satoru leaned on the white pillow, frowning, thinking about the shocking news brought by Orochimaru. Each upgrade of the electromagnetic force will quench the body, which he discovered a long time ago, but he only knows now that this quenching will cause his bloodline to return to his ancestors. But thinking about it carefully, the purity of his Byakugan has indeed improved a lot. It seems that Orochimaru is not lying. He was not looking forward to the process. The Hyuga clan only contains a small part of the Otsutsuki bloodline, and it is difficult to predict whether they will become Otsutsuki if they continue to return to their ancestors. Moreover, there are too many uncontrollable factors in this process. After thinking for a while, Hyuga Satoru suddenly discovered a key point, and his frown suddenly relaxed. I almost forgot that after the electromagnetic force evolves to a certain level, it can control the arrangement of atoms at a microscopic level. By then, you can be as big and as thick as you want. Otsutsuki is just a node in his physical evolution, so why worry about it? Thinking of this, Hyuga Satoru breathed a sigh of relief and his mood gradually relaxed. It seems Wujun has digested this information. Seeing the change in Hyuga Satoru's expression, Orochimaru suddenly laughed and said hoarsely, "Even if my bloodline is returning to its ancestors, it will be a long time before there are obvious changes. The important thing is to focus on the present, isn't it?" Hyuga Satoru looked at him calmly. As expected of Wu-kun, Orochimaru was speechless and could only sigh. "How's Anko?" "She is very good. That child is a rare genius, and her abilities are quite consistent with mine. When you see her again, you may be shocked, right?" "That's good." Hyuga Satoru breathed a sigh of relief. After all, Anko was Orochimaru's disciple in the original work, so Orochimaru would not be harmful to her. "Then I won't disturb Wujun. I hope you recover soon." Orochimaru laughed and silently exited the ward. Hyuga Satoru sighed and started practicing cell activation again, his physical qualities steadily improving. After resting like this for a few days, Hyuga Satoru clenched his fist. The abundant power could not help but make him burst out with a sense of joy. The life magnetic field was also much stronger, like a blazing flame. Compared with before the injury, his strength has been greatly improved after practicing cell activation, and the amount of chakra has also increased a lot. The experience value of electromagnetic force has increased slightly because he used tyrant mode before, which forced him to use a large number of electromagnetic force abilities that were unavailable at his level. In addition, every time he returns from a mission, he will use multiple shadow clone techniques to cause a bug. It's like practicing on the phone. Although he is exhausted after the end, it can provide him with experience points ranging from 1000 to 1000 each time. Electromagnetic force level 55-3. Experience points until next upgrade, 8,945 20,000. With a little more than 10,000 experience points left, he can be promoted to LV4. LV1's electromagnetic control, LV2's life magnetic field, LV3's electromagnetic furnace. What new abilities will appear in LV4? Having tasted the pleasure of the surge in electromagnetic power in tyrant mode, Hyuga Satoru already has an impatient desire for more advanced electromagnetic power. In the afternoon, with the help of Aburame Jiwei, Hyuga Satoru went through the discharge procedures. As soon as he walked out of Konoha Hospital, the dazzling sunlight hit him, causing him to subconsciously cover his eyes with his palms. "Satoru, it seems that you have been recuperating for so long and are no longer able to adapt to such strong sunlight." Next to him, Aburame Jiwei couldn't help but feel a little sad when he saw this scene. "Teacher Jiwei, don't say that. Rest is for better progress. I can't wait to complete the task. Master Hokage is still waiting for us, we'd better go there quickly." Aburame Ji nodded slightly. Hokage room. Sarutobi Hiruzen looked at Hyuga Satoru, who had just come out of the hospital, his face full of admiration, and he couldn't help but nod in admiration. "Very good. Very energetic." When he opened his mouth, he said, "You are very energetic, you are a veteran cadre." Hyuga Satoru couldn't help but groan. Sarutobi Hiruzen naturally didn't know what Hyuga Satoru was thinking, but his eyes were still full of appreciation. Wu, Jiwei should have told you that with your ability, you are no longer suitable to be a genin, so I specially promoted you to chunin. In the future, you can take on A-level and below-level tasks alone. If you have any requirements, you can also ask me. Sarutobi Hiruzen took a long puff of cigarette and murmured. In fact, he originally planned to let Hyuga Satoru enter Anbu. After all, his bow ninjutsu and unique magnet style are particularly suitable for Anbu's mission. However, considering the identity of the other party Hyuga branch house, after hesitating for a long time, he gave up the plan. Promoting Hyuga Satoru to chunin and giving him rights that ordinary chunin do not have will not only maximize his rapid growth, but also prevent him from receiving too much attention. After all, the ninja world is not peaceful now. Suddenly, he seemed to think of something, showed a worried look, and asked Hyuga tentatively. Satoru, I heard that you used a very costly forbidden technique. I wonder if your body was affected. Does the forbidden technique that costs a lot of money refer to the tyrant mode? Hyuga Satoru thought for a moment and said, that forbidden technique was developed by me unintentionally. It can greatly improve my strength in a short period of time. It was also by virtue of this technique that I was able to survive the encounter with the two Kurigakure ninjas. Quote, as for the price, because this technique overdraws the life potential in the short term and squeezes the physical strength, it will damage the foundation of my cells, thereby shortening my lifespan to a certain extent. He raised his head, his eyes not red, his heart not beating, and he looked at Sarutobi Hiruzen calmly. Is that so? That would be a bit troublesome. Sarutobi Hiruzen had a slight headache, shortening his lifespan. The price of this forbidden technique was too high. He had no doubts. After all, the information reported by Konoha Hospital did mention that Hyuga Satoru's cells were damaged, and it was difficult to see the shortened lifespan with the naked eye. Hyuga's expression didn't change, as if the nonsense he just said was true. Damage life. It does damage the lifespan. I can maintain it for 3 minutes if I turn on the tyrant mode. A lifespan of 3 minutes is not a lifespan. Also, after it was over, my body hurt to the point of death, and I couldn't make any money for several days. Wasn't this shortening my lifespan in disguise? The information Anko provided only said that he survived the attacks of the two Jonin. Hyuga Satoru doesn't know that Hokage didn't send Anbu to investigate where he fought, and he doesn't know if he understands the true power of tyrant mode. Anyway, the side effects are definitely correct in most cases. On the other hand, Aburame Jiwei next to him felt even more guilty because of Hyuga Satoru's nonsense remarks. Sarutobi Hiruzen sighed and looked at Hyuga Satoru with a complicated expression. Satoru, you are the true successor of the Will of Fire. Let's do this. Your reward for accepting the mission this time will be doubled, which is considered as compensation for you. Quote. Hyuga Satoru's eyes lit up, and in the mission book that Hokage then took out, he selected 3 missions with the highest pay in succession. Sarutobi Hiruzen's face immediately turned green, but he had already said the words and it was hard for him to repent. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.